There is a specific, agonizing kind of exhaustion that descends upon you when you finally realize the ladder you have spent your entire life climbing is leaning against the wrong wall. You lie awake in the shadows not because you have failed the world, but because you have succeeded, and the reward tastes like ash in your mouth. Modern society has sold you the most devastating, politely packaged lie in human history. The promise that if you just acquire enough status, secure enough wealth, and capture enough of the crowd's fleeting admiration, the relentless burning ache inside your chest will finally quiet down. We are raised inside an industrial machine that treats the human soul like a starving furnace. It demands that we constantly shovel the heavy coal of our achievements into the fire, promising that one day the flames will settle into a warm, comfortable glow. But the fire never settles. The more you feed the machine, the more it demands, until you are left completely hollowed out, staring at the dark ceiling of your bedroom, wondering why you are still so terribly empty when you have done absolutely everything you were supposed to do. To understand the roots of this midnight starvation, we must look at a man who successfully conquered the very pinnacle of the ancient world, only to find himself choking on his own success. Long before he became a saint, Augustine of Hippo was a master of the human-made machine. In the late 4th century, he was the imperial orator in Milan, essentially the voice of the Roman emperor himself. He was brilliant, celebrated, wealthy, and surrounded by the absolute highest echelons of society. He had won the game. He possessed everything the modern world tells you to strive for. Yet, Augustine recorded a moment of profound, shattering clarity. While riding through the cobblestone streets of Milan, deeply stressed and preparing to deliver a massive, ego-driven speech that would secure him even more wealth and power, he noticed a destitute, filthy beggar laughing joyously in the gutter, completely drunk and entirely at peace. Augustine stopped in his tracks, utterly crushed by the realization that this beggar, with absolutely nothing to his name, possessed the very peace of mind that Augustine was bleeding himself dry to achieve. He looked at his own towering ambitions, his prestigious titles, and his frantic networking, and he realized it was all a sophisticated form of torture. He was dragging his soul over broken glass to buy a satisfaction that the material world was fundamentally incapable of selling. This is the raw, unfiltered truth of your own exhaustion tonight. You are suffering from the profound fatigue of a misplaced love. You possess an infinite, bottomless capacity for devotion, but the modern architecture of society has hijacked that capacity and chained it to a finite, decaying world. Imagine a majestic, towering deep-sea galleon, engineered by a master shipwright to navigate the vast, unshakable depths of the eternal ocean. Now, imagine that same massive ship being violently dragged out of the water and forced to sail across a dry, barren desert of jagged gravel and sand. The ship's hull is splintering. Its massive timbers are groaning and cracking under the unnatural friction. It is entirely out of its element, grinding itself to dust. This is exactly what you are doing when you attempt to satisfy your eternal soul with the temporary praise of a corporate office, the shifting numbers of a bank account, or the hollow validation of societal approval. You are dragging a divine vessel across dry gravel. Augustine looked at the wreckage of his own ambition and wrote the single most accurate diagnosis of the human condition ever put to paper. You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. He realized that the massive aching canyon inside your chest is not a biological error or a psychological defect. It is a brilliant, intentional design. The Supreme Architect engineered your heart with a specific, infinite shape so that absolutely nothing less than the infinite could ever fill it. The human-made system thrives on your restlessness. The economy requires you to be thirsty so that it can continually sell you drops of salt water. It demands your anxiety. But the Creator requires absolutely nothing of you except your surrender. He designed the world to disappoint you so that you would eventually stop chewing on the stones of earthly ambition and return to the only source of living water that can actually quench your thirst. When you agonize over your career, your reputation, or your material security in the dark, you are giving the artificial machine a power it does not actually possess. You are treating the flawed, terrified judgments of society as if they are the ultimate tribunal of your worth. They are not. The society that demands your absolute perfection is the exact same society that forgets its heroes the moment they disappear. It is a city of dust, built by terrified people trying to outrun their own mortality. In the profound isolation of this room, you have been granted the absolute right to resign from the desert. You do not need to be the architect of your own value. You do not need to construct a flawless resume to justify the space you take up on this earth. The heavy, rusted armor of your professional and social identity was completely unnecessary from the exact moment you were born. The biological toll of this ambition, the tight, defensive posture of your shoulders, perpetually held high, as if you are waiting for the next blow from the world, is simply the physical echo of a soul trying to survive outside of its intended element. You do not have to drag the ship across the gravel for another inch. The heavy, splintering weight of your worldly expectations is an illusion that can be dropped the moment you recognize its futility. The frantic demands of the earthly empire have lost their jurisdiction here. You are not a failure for feeling exhausted by the world. You are simply waking up to the fact that you belong to something vastly superior. Your worth is flawlessly, permanently secured by the true sovereign who breathed you into existence. There is absolutely nothing left to earn. The ledger is blank. But as the heavy machinery of your ambition finally grinds to a halt, revealing the quiet space beneath it, you are often left alone in the dark with an entirely different kind of tyrant. You realize that even if you drop the heavy armor of your career, your mind is still violently stretched across the calendar, bleeding out over days that do not even exist. The torture of the timeline and the sanctuary of now. Look at the thick, unmoving shadows settling across the architecture of your room. Physically, you are enclosed in a space of absolute stillness, entirely protected from the elements. Yet the interior of your mind feels like a deafening, chaotic battlefield. You are a prisoner of the timeline. The modern world has infected you with the deeply toxic belief that your existence is a linear commodity that must be obsessively managed, analyzed, and controlled from beginning to end. Society chops the sacred, unmeasured flow of life into rigid, terrifying metrics. Fiscal quotas, 5-year plans, and relentless deadlines. It forces you to operate as a hyper-vigilant time traveler, constantly judging the unchangeable ghosts of your past and violently bracing for the phantom catastrophes of your future. We are explicitly taught that to sit perfectly still in the present moment is a dangerous luxury, a form of laziness that will leave us entirely vulnerable to the unpredictable storms of tomorrow. And so, you vibrate with an exhausting, low-frequency anxiety, desperately trying to stretch your limited human consciousness across the infinite, unmanageable span of time. Augustine understood this midnight paralysis intimately. In the 11th book of his Confessions, he tackled the devastating mystery of time, recognizing it as the primary engine of human suffering. As he watched the mighty, supposedly indestructible Roman Empire begin to fracture and collapse around him, citizens were losing their minds with panic over the future and grieving the lost glory of the past. But Augustine, looking deeply into the internal mechanics of his own anxiety, realized that neither the past nor the future actually possesses any material reality. He discovered that the past is nothing more than a memory existing entirely in the present, and the future is nothing more than an expectation existing entirely in the present. When we agonize over time, we suffer from what he called distentio animi, the agonizing distension or stretching of the mind. Imagine the brutal, visceral reality of a medieval rack. A prisoner is laid flat on a heavy wooden table in a dark dungeon, their wrists bound tightly to a heavy iron wheel at the top, and their ankles tied to a wheel at the bottom. The interrogator slowly turns the cranks, violently pulling the body in two completely opposite directions at the exact same time. The joints pop, the muscles scream, and the fabric of the body is torn apart by the opposing forces. This is not just a historical metaphor. It is the exact anatomical diagram of your consciousness tonight. The human-made system has tied your mind to the rack. One heavy, rusted chain is wrapped tightly around your wrists, violently dragging you forward into the terrifying, unwritten expectations of tomorrow. The emails, the financial obligations, the inevitable decline of your physical body. The other chain is anchored to your ankles, violently pulling you backward into the heavy, unchangeable regrets of yesterday. The conversations you fumbled, the opportunities you missed, the versions of yourself that no longer exist. You are being ripped apart by your own imagination. The sheer physical exhaustion you feel deep in your bones right now is the biological result of a finite creature trying to perform the impossible task of occupying 3 dimensions of time simultaneously. But the light of unflinching honesty reveals a magnificent, reality-altering truth. You absolutely do not possess the spiritual jurisdiction to hold the timeline together. When you burn your vital energy trying to manage the past and control the future, you are secretly committing an act of profound arrogance. You are attempting to mimic the omnipresence of the Supreme Architect. The Creator exists entirely outside the massive turning wheel of the clock. He dwells in a state of absolute, unshakable, eternal now. He flawlessly sees the beginning and the end of the cosmos in one perfect, unmoving, simultaneous glance. The machine of society tells you that you must be the master of your own destiny. But this is a cruel illusion designed to keep you frantically running on the treadmill. The Creator designed your mind to be incredibly small, beautifully focused, and mercifully restricted to the immediate present. The ink on the pages of your past is completely dry, entirely absorbed and managed by His unconditional mercy. The terrifying blank canvas of your future is perfectly mapped and absolutely secured by His flawless providence. The true sovereign governs the turning of the earth and the orbits of the stars. He absolutely does not require your panicked, sleep-deprived human logic to keep the universe from falling apart. When you desperately stretch your mind out of the present moment, you are literally trying to run away from the only place where the Creator's peace can actually reach you. The human machine demands that you live in the anxiety of the next, because a soul that is resting perfectly in the now cannot be manipulated, marketed to, or controlled. The remedy for your exhaustion is not to plan better for tomorrow. The remedy is to orchestrate a radical, internal collapse of the timeline. You must deliberately step off the rack. The sheer undeniable reality of gravity holding you in this exact room, in this exact razor-thin fraction of a second, is the only truth that matters tonight. The past is not in this room. The future has not arrived in this room. There is only the heavy, unjudging silence of the night. By reaching out with your spiritual hands and violently severing the chains that are pulling you apart, you let the rope of yesterday snap. You let the rope of tomorrow break. The stretched defensive tension across the base of your skull begins to dissolve the moment you draw your vital, eternal energy violently away from the massive, terrifying landscapes of your calendar. You pull that energy deep down into the very center of your quiet, resting core. The universe does not need you to be a historian tonight, nor does it ask you to be a prophet. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to manage the unchangeable past and the unborn future. You are no longer a fragmented consciousness torn across the years. You have gathered yourself back into a single, unified center of gravity. The timeline has vanished, leaving you entirely protected by the eternal reality of the Creator. Yet, even as the burden of the calendar dissolves, and you find yourself safely anchored in the present second, you might suddenly notice the terrifying shape of the shadows in the corner of your room. You are no longer fighting tomorrow, but the modern world has trained you to believe that the darkness itself is a physical monster waiting to strike. The weightless shadow and the phantom gladiator. Pay close attention to the sudden, icy spike of dread that occasionally jolts your nervous system just as the house goes quiet. It hits you right in the center of your stomach, a breathless, paralyzing terror regarding everything that could possibly go wrong tomorrow. The modern world has entirely convinced you that your anxieties, your fears, and the looming threats of societal failure are massive, heavy, solid objects. We are raised in a culture of hypervigilance that explicitly teaches us to view the unknown as a physical monster waiting in the dark. The artificial machine of the global economy literally profits from this terror. It sells you security systems, insurance policies, constant data streams, and productivity hacks, entirely predicated on the belief that if you stop fighting the darkness for even a fraction of a second, it will physically crush you to death. You lie here, your abdominal muscles tight, your jaw locked, exhausting your vital energy by aggressively bracing for an impact that never actually arrives. To dismantle this specific midnight torture, we must examine a terrifying philosophical cult that completely consumed the mind of Saint Augustine for nearly a decade. In his desperate 20s, long before he found peace, Augustine fell into a sect known as Manichaeism. This group taught a paralyzing, horrifying doctrine. They believed the universe was a literal physical war zone, evenly divided between two solid opposing forces, a kingdom of light and a kingdom of darkness. They taught that evil, fear, and suffering were actual physical substances. To the young Augustine, this meant that the anxiety he felt in his chest was a literal, heavy, dark matter invading his body. He spent years utterly terrified, viewing himself as a helpless casualty in a cosmic crossfire, desperately trying to physically fight off the dark. This is the exact same toxic hallucination the human-made machine imposes upon you today. You are currently living the life of a blindfolded gladiator locked inside a pitch-black arena. You have been handed a heavy, rusted iron sword by a society that tells you the room is filled with stone giants. Every time you feel a wave of anxiety about your finances, your relationships, or your fragile status, you violently swing the sword in the dark. You are drenched in sweat, your heart is hammering against your ribs, and your arms are burning with absolute, devastating exhaustion. You are fighting for your life. But the breathtaking, reality-altering truth that Augustine eventually discovered, the revelation that completely freed his soul from terror, is that there is absolutely nothing in the arena with you. After years of exhaustion, Augustine experienced a massive breakthrough regarding the nature of the supreme architect. He realized a concept that altered human history: privatio boni, the privation of good. Augustine looked at the infinite, flawless perfection of the Creator and deduced that the true sovereign is the summum bonum, the highest good and the only true, solid substance in the entire universe. Therefore, evil, fear, anxiety, and darkness do not actually possess any physical or ontological mass. They are not solid objects. They are merely a lack. They are an absence of light, just as a shadow is not a physical thing you can touch or wrestle, but simply a place where the light has temporarily been blocked. The heavy, suffocating anxieties keeping you awake tonight possess absolutely zero substance. They have no mass. They have no weight. You cannot wrestle a ghost to the ground, and you cannot cut a shadow with an iron sword. The exhaustion you feel in your core right now is not the result of the world crushing you. It is the biological toll of frantically, violently swinging a heavy sword at empty air. When you burn your precious energy bracing for disaster, you are quietly committing an act of profound spiritual blindness. You are giving weight to weightless things. You are looking at the Creator, the one who exists as the absolute, impenetrable, brilliant reality that holds the cosmos together. And you are arrogant enough to believe that the panicked, imaginary hallucinations of your own ego possess enough actual mass to defeat His providence. The human-made system needs you to believe the shadows are solid, so that you will keep buying its artificial armor. But the Creator designed the shadows to be entirely hollow, so that they could never permanently harm your eternal soul. The specific, terrifying moments of profound panic you have experienced in your life, the moments when you finally braced for the ultimate, catastrophic ruin, only to wake up the next morning and realize the sun was still shining and you were still breathing, are flawless proofs of this divine mercy. The monster never arrived because the monster is not real. To find the deep, restorative rest your body is begging for, you must orchestrate a radical surrender of your weapons. You must intentionally stand down. The tight, defensive knot in your solar plexus is the biological armor your body has instinctively engaged to protect your vital organs from the phantom threats of tomorrow. This tension is the physical manifestation of your refusal to accept the absolute safety of the Creator's light. It is the grip of your hands on the hilt of the sword. But the night around you is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you permission to stop fighting the empty air. As the realization sets in that the giants do not exist, the rusted iron sword simply slips from your exhausted fingers. It hits the floor of the arena with a dull, distant thud. The tight, defensive muscles in your stomach completely and beautifully dissolve, leaving your abdomen entirely soft, unburdened by the need to brace for impact. The massive, terrifying illusions of your worldly fears instantly evaporate into thin, harmless mist. The exhausting, terrifying hum of your internal gladiator permanently flatlines. You do not have to fight the dark. The shadows have no weight. You are completely enveloped in the unshakable light of the Supreme Architect. But as the heavy iron sword hits the floor, and you realize the monsters were just shadows, your eyes begin to adjust to the quiet dark. You suddenly see the towering walls of the arena itself, and you realize with a sinking dread that you built this massive, exhausting enclosure with your own two hands. The glass tower and the arrogance of the self-made soul. There is a subtle, agonizing hum of guilt that vibrates beneath the surface of every single achievement in the modern world. Even when you are lying perfectly still, having completed every task on your rigorous daily list, a quiet, cruel voice whispers from the dark corners of your mind. It tells you that your efforts were slightly imperfect, that your discipline is fundamentally flawed, and that you have not yet earned your right to rest. The artificial machine of human society is an architecture built entirely on the weaponization of self-reliance. We are drowning in a hyper-capitalist culture that aggressively worships the myth of the self-made individual. It explicitly teaches you that your ultimate worth, your moral purity, and your inner peace are commodities you must manually extract from the earth using your own willpower. Society hands you a heavy set of tools and tells you that if you optimize your morning routine, completely eradicate your weaknesses, and relentlessly hustle, you can build a flawless, impenetrable identity. And if you feel broken, if you feel exhausted, if you fall short of absolute perfection, the machine tells you it is entirely your own fault for not trying hard enough. You are awake tonight because you are collapsing under the crushing, suffocating pressure of trying to be your own savior. Augustine recognized this exact brand of spiritual tyranny during one of the most intense philosophical battles of his life. In the early 5th century, a highly charismatic, rigidly disciplined monk named Pelagius began preaching a doctrine that took the ancient world by storm. Pelagianism essentially taught that human beings possess the absolute, independent free will to achieve total moral and spiritual perfection without the direct intervention of divine grace. Pelagius argued that human nature was essentially a blank slate, and if you simply tried hard enough and maintained perfect discipline, you could be flawless entirely on your own merits. While the crowds cheered for this empowering, self-reliant message, Augustine looked at it with absolute, unblinking horror. He saw it not as a doctrine of liberation, but as a cruel, impossible death sentence for the human soul. Augustine knew the dark, chaotic, fundamentally broken depths of his own heart. He knew that the harder a human being tries to achieve independent perfection, the deeper they fall into the paralyzing abyss of their own inadequacy. The modern hustle culture is simply Pelagianism dressed in a tailored business suit. You are currently attempting to build a massive, perfectly flawless glass tower in the dead center of a roaring hurricane, using nothing but your own bare, bleeding hands. Every time the wind shatters a pane of glass, every time you lose your patience, fail at a goal, or expose a human vulnerability, you view it as a catastrophic moral failure. You spend your nights frantically applying tape to the cracks, absolutely terrified to go to sleep, because you believe that the structural integrity of your entire existence relies exclusively on your exhausted vigilance. But the light of unflinching honesty reveals a magnificent, liberating truth that utterly shatters the machine's demands. The Creator absolutely never asked you to be flawless. Your magnificent, eternal soul is loved not because of your pristine architecture, but precisely within the beautiful wreckage of your inability to save yourself. When you burn your vital energy in the dark, punishing yourself for your imperfections, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual arrogance. You are actively declaring that the infinite, perfect, completely unearned grace of the true sovereign is somehow unnecessary, and that you can buy your way into peace through a flawless performance. You are looking at the supreme architect, the one who intentionally designed the human condition to be deeply fragile, so that we would learn the breathtaking beauty of dependence. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, traumatized ego can somehow manufacture a perfection that rivals his. Augustine realized that the human machine demands perfection to maintain your economic utility. But the divine economy operates entirely on unconditional mercy. The specific, deeply terrifying moments of profound failure you have experienced, the moments when your glass tower completely shattered and you realized you could not hold your life together on your own, are absolutely required by the infinite wisdom of divine providence. The tower must fall. The illusion of your self-made supremacy must be violently destroyed. It is the only way you will finally drop the heavy, rusted tools of your worldly perfectionism and turn your exhausted soul back to the healing waters of absolute, unearned divine grace. To orchestrate an internal bankruptcy of your pride, you must willingly abandon the construction site. The faint, agonizing strain humming through your shoulders and the subtle locking of your jaw are the physical manifestations of your refusal to accept divine mercy. It is your body physically holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom architect, gripping a heavy hammer you were never meant to swing. But the vast, unjudging blanket of the night offers you the profound permission to finally stop building. As you surrender the desperate need to be self-sufficient, your hands simply open. The heavy tools fall from your grasp. You step entirely out of the glass tower, and the wind shatters it into a million harmless pieces of falling dust. The tight, defensive tension across your shoulders beautifully settles, and your nervous system entirely powers down its internal builder. The terrifying illusion of the world's demand for perfection melts away, replaced by a vast, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute forgiveness flowing into the canyon of your soul. You are not the flawless architect of your own salvation, and the demand for perfection is completely, wonderfully over. Yet, as the glass tower shatters into dust, and you step out into the calm, open air of grace, the profound silence is suddenly broken by a distant, deafening roar. It is the sound of the crowd, the thousands of voices you have spent your life trying to impress, demanding to know why you stopped building. The deafening Colosseum and the inner teacher. The profound silence of your newly liberated architecture is suddenly broken by a distant, deafening roar. It is the sound of the crowd, the thousands of voices, faces, and digital avatars you have spent your entire life trying to impress, demanding to know why you stopped building. Even though the physical room around you is entirely quiet, the interior of your mind is trapped in a relentless, exhausting cycle of cross-examination. You lie in the dark, replaying conversations from hours ago, dissecting the precise tone of your own voice, terrified that you said the wrong thing. You mentally anticipate the arguments of tomorrow, carefully drafting your defenses to ensure you appear competent, likable, and relevant. The modern world has engineered a culture of absolute, suffocating noise, convincing you that your truth, your safety, and your ultimate identity must be explicitly crowdsourced. The human-made machine operates on a terrifying philosophy of public consensus. It tells you that if you are not seen, validated, and continuously approved by the collective gaze of society, your existence holds no actual weight. We are handed glowing screens and shoved onto a brutal global stage, explicitly instructed to measure our spiritual value by the fleeting, fickle, mathematically manipulated metrics of human applause. Because of this toxic conditioning, you treat the outside world as if it holds the ultimate binding verdict on your soul. You burn your precious, irreplaceable, vital energy, desperately trying to translate the chaotic screaming of the mob into a coherent map for your life. To understand the absolute, crushing futility of this exhausting performance, look to the biography of a man who was arguably the greatest crowd manipulator of late antiquity. Before his conversion, Saint Augustine was an elite rhetorician. His entire profession consisted of standing before massive, highly critical, deeply cynical audiences in Carthage, Rome, and Milan, and using the sheer brilliance of his vocabulary to bend their emotions to his will. He knew exactly how to make the mob cheer. He knew exactly how to make them weep. He was the absolute, undisputed master of public approval. Yet, at the absolute height of his career, surrounded by the deafening adoration of the Roman elite, he realized he was fundamentally starving to death. He looked at the crowds that cheered for his speeches and saw a terrifying truth. The mob is entirely blind. They applaud what is shiny. They condemn what they do not understand, and their favor shifts like sand in a violent hurricane. To anchor your sense of self to the opinions of a crowd is to beg for a life of pure, uninterrupted psychological terror. This is the exact torture you are subjecting yourself to tonight. You are standing completely exposed in the dead center of a massive, roaring, ancient Colosseum. The stands stretch up into the pitch-black sky, completely packed with the faceless, judging silhouettes of your peers, your critics, and the unforgiving societal standards you feel you must meet. Every single shadow in the stands is screaming a different set of instructions at you. One voice demands you work harder. Another mocks your exhaustion. A third violently criticizes your appearance and your financial status. You are spinning frantically in the dry dirt of the arena, drenched in the cold sweat of hypervigilance, desperately trying to listen to all of them at once, absolutely terrified that if you miss a single critique or fail to please a single spectator, the lions will be released to tear you apart. But Augustine, utterly exhausted by the screaming of the arena, turned his back on the crowd and discovered a breathtaking, revolutionary concept that completely dismantled the power of the world. He discovered the Magister Internus, the inner teacher. Augustine realized that the material earth possesses absolutely no jurisdiction to teach the soul what is true. The external world is nothing but a chaotic theater of shifting opinions, blind assumptions, and sensory illusions. He realized that the Creator, the supreme architect of truth, did not leave you orphaned in a noisy, vicious world, desperately needing to crowdsource your morality or your worth from deeply flawed strangers. Instead, the Creator installed a flawless, perfect, completely silent sanctuary directly into the deepest, most inaccessible center of your consciousness. The truth is not out there in the marketplace. The truth is an internal illumination, a divine light shining perfectly within you, entirely separate from the chaotic screaming of human society. When you exhaust yourself agonizing over the judgments of other people, you are quietly committing a profound act of spiritual treason. You are actively declaring that the flawless, unshakable, internal guidance of the true sovereign is somehow insufficient. You are looking at the Creator, the one who speaks exclusively in the profound, heavy language of silence, the one who intimately knows your absolute value without requiring a single human witness. And you are arrogant enough to believe that the panicked, traumatized, heavily flawed human beings around you somehow possess a more accurate verdict on your life. Wisdom reveals the breathtaking mercy hidden entirely within the complete irrelevance of public opinion. The Creator absolutely did not design the earth to be your jury. The human-made system engineered the noise of the crowd to keep you distracted, terrified, and constantly performing. But the Creator engineered His truth to be completely independent of the world's volume, freeing you to simply stop listening to the madness. The moments of profound social alienation you have experienced, the times when the crowd misunderstood you, when you felt entirely disconnected from the opinions of your peers and completely alone in a crowded room, are not signs of your failure. They are flawless, intentional interventions by the Master Weaver. The crowd must disappoint you. The applause must fade. The noise must become unbearable. It is the only way you will finally stop spinning in the dirt of the arena. Drop the heavy, rusted shield of your public image and turn your exhausted ears inward to the healing silence of the inner teacher. The faint, agonizing strain humming deep inside your inner ear. The tight, defensive posture of your neck braced to hear your name called from the dark. And the rapid, microscopic shifting of your eyes behind your closed lids are the physical manifestations of your refusal to stop listening to the world. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom crowd. But the night around you is a vast, unjudging, incredibly heavy blanket of soundproofing, offering you the profound permission to finally tune out. The opinions of the world have absolutely no mass, no presence, and no power in this room. You turn your back on the roaring stands of the Colosseum. You walk straight toward the massive, heavy wooden doors leading out of the arena. Stepping through the threshold, you pull the heavy doors completely shut behind you, instantly cutting off the screaming of the crowd. The defensive tension inside your ears beautifully settles. The exhausting vibration in your jaw entirely ceases. Your neck falls heavily and softly into the pillow, entirely powering down your external radar. The terrifying illusion of the world's judgment melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute silence flowing perfectly into the canyon of your soul. You are no longer an exhausted gladiator performing for strangers. The interrogation is over, and you are completely shielded from the noise. Yet, as the heavy wooden doors of the Colosseum slam shut, and the deafening roar of society is replaced by absolute quiet, you suddenly notice the physical sensation in your hands. You are no longer holding a shield for the crowd, but your fingers are locked in a terrified, agonizing death grip, fiercely clinging to something you are absolutely terrified to lose. The hoarding of dust in the sanctuary of the eternal. There is a cold, subtle dread that slowly creeps into your chest when you look closely at the things you love the most in this world. It is the terrifying, unshakable realization that absolutely everything you are holding on to is currently, inevitably slipping through your fingers. The modern, human-made machine has built an entire global infrastructure upon the toxic delusion of permanent possession. Society commands you to acquire things: youth, wealth, prestigious titles, perfectly curated relationships, and beautiful homes, and then brutally demands that you freeze them in time. We are explicitly taught that losing what we have acquired is the ultimate failure of the human will. We are conditioned to treat the people and objects in our lives as if they are concrete pillars designed to hold up the eternal weight of our souls. And so you spend your life frantically attempting to build a permanent, unshakable fortress out of materials that are mathematically guaranteed to rot, rust, age, and completely wash away. You lie awake tonight, exhausted by the profound grief of impermanence. You are quietly mourning a chapter of your life that is closed, agonizing over the inevitable aging of your physical body, or sweating over the fragility of your financial security. You are holding on so tightly that your spiritual knuckles are white, paralyzed by the belief that if you unclench your grip for even a fraction of a second, you will lose everything that makes you who you are. St. Augustine lived through the exact devastating agony of this specific midnight terror. In his early 20s, while living in his hometown of Thagaste, Augustine had a childhood friend whom he loved with a fierce, absolute, and total devotion. He poured the entire infinite capacity of his soul into this single mortal human being, anchoring his entire universe to his friend's existence. But tragically, a sudden fever swept through the town and his friend died. Augustine's reaction was not just grief, it was a total apocalyptic psychological collapse. In his Confessions, he described his soul as bleeding, violently torn apart, and desperately looking for a place to rest, only to find that every single place he looked was suddenly hollow. His suffering was so profound and unbearable that he had to physically flee his hometown because the mere sight of the streets without his friend was a torture he could not survive. But looking back on this devastating collapse years later, Augustine realized a magnificent, earth-shattering truth about the architecture of human suffering. He realized that his agony was not a punishment from a cruel universe, but the natural, physical consequence of attempting to anchor an eternal soul to a temporary object. He had loved a mortal as if he were immortal. He had treated a beautiful, fragile piece of the Creator's handiwork as if it were the Creator himself. Augustine formulated a profound, liberating philosophy, distinguishing between uti, to use, and frui, to enjoy. He realized that the magnificent, breathtaking things of the material earth, relationships, achievements, the beauty of nature, were explicitly designed by the supreme architect to be used as vehicles. They are beautiful, temporary bridges, engineered to inspire awe and carry us toward the ultimate destination. But only the Creator himself, the unchangeable, eternal, indestructible source of all reality, is meant to be enjoyed as our final resting place. You are awake and exhausted tonight because you have pitched your permanent tent directly in the middle of a temporary bridge. Imagine yourself locked inside a massive, heavy iron vault deep underground. You are surrounded by massive blocks of ice that represent your worldly achievements, your youth, and your material security. The human-made system has told you that your survival depends entirely on keeping this ice frozen forever. So you are frantically, desperately wrapping your warm, bare arms around the blocks, trying to protect them from the air. But your very embrace is causing them to melt faster. The water is slipping through your fingers, pooling on the stone floor and draining away into the dark. You are shivering, weeping with exhaustion, and completely paralyzed by the terror of loss. Entirely obsessed with hoarding temporary water, completely ignoring the fact that if you simply walked out of the vault, you would find a massive, infinite, completely unshakable ocean waiting for you. When you burn your vital energy in the dark, desperately clinging to the fading, temporary fragments of your life, you are secretly committing an act of profound spiritual misdirection. You are actively declaring that the flawless, perfect, eternal permanence of the true sovereign is somehow less reliable than the shifting dust of the earth. You are looking at the Creator, the one whose love is the only indestructible force in the cosmos, the one who explicitly designed the seasons to change, so you would not mistakenly build your eternal house in the winter. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, exhausted human hands can somehow superglue the universe in place. Wisdom reveals the breathtaking mercy hidden entirely within your absolute inability to freeze time. The Creator absolutely did not design the earth to last forever. The human-made system engineered the illusion of permanence to keep you constantly buying, repairing, and hoarding. But the Creator engineered the fleeting nature of the world to completely, utterly free you to look upward. The moments of profound loss you have experienced, the times when the things you loved slipped away, and you realized you could not stop the turning of the earth, are perfectly, flawlessly known and intentionally permitted by the unshakable wisdom of divine providence. The ice must melt. The illusion of earthly permanence must be violently destroyed. It is the only way you will finally, beautifully, stop fiercely gripping the fading dust, drop the heavy rusted anxiety of hoarding, and turn your exhausted soul back to the profound healing reality of absolute, unearned, divine eternity. The faint, agonizing, tightly controlled clenching inside your chest, the heavy, dragging sensation in your forearms, and the subtle locking of your fingers are the biological manifestations of your refusal to accept divine permanence. Your body is holding on to the exhausting illusion of the hoarder, subconsciously bracing to protect what you cannot keep. But the night around you is a vast, unjudging, incredibly peaceful release, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally let the temporary things go. You do not have to hold the world together. You simply open your hands. The melting ice slips from your grasp. You step back, turning away from the rusted vault of the human machine, entirely surrendering the need to control the passage of time. The tight, defensive tension across your chest melts away. Your fingers fall heavily and softly open against the mattress, releasing the rigid, unbending focus of your nervous system. The desperate need to possess the temporary world completely drains from your heart, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's eternal, unchangeable presence, flowing perfectly into the infinite canyon of your soul. Yet, as the cold water of your earthly hoarding drains away into the dark, and your hands are finally empty, you realize you are standing at the edge of a massive, terrifyingly wide intersection. Now that you are no longer holding on to the past, the modern world immediately rushes in to demand that you perfectly calculate your next move, the iron ring of choices and the divided will. Look closely at the specific, frantic calculation currently looping relentlessly behind your closed eyes. Even as your physical body begs for rest, your intellect is aggressively sorting through a dizzying, suffocating maze of decisions. You are standing at the edge of a massive, terrifying intersection, obsessively analyzing the paths you walked today, and frantically mapping the thousands of potential routes you could take tomorrow. The modern world has completely crippled you with the toxic, paralyzing lie of infinite autonomy. We are raised inside a hyper-consumerist machine that explicitly equates human freedom with the possession of limitless, unending choices. Society tells you that the ultimate pinnacle of a successful life is the ability to perfectly curate every single microscopic variable of your existence. Your career trajectory, your optimal lifestyle, your personal brand, and your relationships. It places you in the center of a massive, overwhelming control room and tells you that if you are unhappy, if you are exhausted, or if you feel a profound sense of emptiness, it is entirely your own fault for simply pulling the wrong levers. The human-made system crushes you under the unbearable weight of continuous optimization, forcing you to constantly ask if you are making the absolute best possible choice out of a million competing options. You lie awake, completely paralyzed by the terror of missing out, terrified that one wrong decision, one slightly inefficient pivot, will permanently ruin the entire architecture of your destiny. To understand the sheer biological and spiritual agony of this condition, we must examine a man who was utterly torn apart by his own capacity to choose. In the late summer of 386 AD, Augustine was a man violently divided. He possessed a brilliant, towering intellect that clearly saw the absolute emptiness of the earthly empire, and he deeply desired to surrender his life to the peace of the Creator. But he could not do it. He retreated to a quiet garden in Milan, completely shattered by a violent, internal civil war. He threw himself to the ground beneath a fig tree, weeping bitterly, experiencing a state of absolute psychological paralysis. Augustine realized something terrifying about human nature. The intellect can know the exact truth, but the human will can violently, inexplicably refuse to choose it. He described this agonizing state not as the presence of two different natures, but as a single soul suffering from a diseased, split will. He wanted to be free, and yet he fiercely guarded his own chains. The sheer, devastating effort of trying to force his broken, divided human will to make the perfect choice was tearing his sanity to shreds. This is the exact torment keeping you awake tonight. You are standing in the freezing fog at the center of a massive, dark crossroads. there are 10,000 paths branching out in every direction, fading into the terrifying mist of the unknown. The modern machine has handed you a massive, impossibly heavy iron ring, holding 1,000,000 different rusted keys. You are standing there, bleeding from your fingertips, shivering in the cold, frantically trying to sort through the iron ring, desperately trying to figure out which exact key unlocks the perfect, optimized life. You are paralyzed, terrified to take a single step down any path, because choosing one route means violently abandoning the other 9,999. But the unblinking light of truth reveals a magnificent, breathtaking reality that completely destroys the illusion of the crossroads. The Supreme Architect never designed your soul to bear the crushing, impossible weight of infinite autonomy. When you burn your vital energy, agonizing over every microscopic choice, terrified that you will accidentally ruin your destiny, you are secretly committing an act of spiritual delusion. You are actively declaring that the flawless, perfect, all-encompassing providence of the true sovereign can somehow be derailed by your flawed human calculations. You are looking at the Creator, the Master Navigator, who knows exactly how to draw perfectly straight lines using crooked human instruments. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, exhausted, decision-fatigued mind is required to flawlessly map the universe. Augustine realized that the modern definition of freedom, the ability to choose absolutely anything at any time, is not freedom at all. It is simply wandering blindly in the dark. True, unshakable freedom, libertas, is the profound, beautiful grace of being bound entirely to the highest good. The human-made system gives you 1,000,000 choices to keep you perpetually anxious, divided, and consuming. But the Creator offers you something infinitely better than a choice. He offers you a destination. He does not require you to possess the perfect map, because He has already guaranteed the arrival. The specific moments of profound decision fatigue you feel, the times when you simply want someone else to take the wheel because you are so incredibly tired of managing your own life, are not signs of weakness. They are the flawless biological alarms of a soul that was meant to be guided, not to be its own God. The illusion of absolute self-determination must shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop frantically sorting through the keys, drop the heavy iron ring into the dirt, and turn your exhausted face upward towards the unshakable certainty of divine guidance. To orchestrate a radical surrender of your autonomy, you must deliberately step away from the control panel, the restless, agonizing vibration humming through your legs, the subtle shifting tension in your hips, and the tight, anxious restriction in your breath are the physical manifestations of your refusal to let go of the map. Your body is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom navigator, subconsciously bracing to take another terrifying step in the dark. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally stop choosing. You do not have to figure out tomorrow tonight. As you surrender the desperate need for absolute autonomy, your hands simply open. The massive, heavy ring of iron keys slips from your grasp and hits the ground with a dull, heavy thud. You completely abandon the crossroads, ceasing the frantic calculation of the mind, and simply sit down in the quiet mist. The tight, defensive, strained tension across your legs beautifully melts. The exhausting urge to pace entirely ceases. Your thighs and calves sink heavily and softly into the mattress, entirely powering down your internal compass. The terrifying illusion of the world's infinite demands instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute certainty flowing perfectly into the canyon of your soul. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of perfectly curating every variable of your existence. Your ultimate trajectory is flawlessly, permanently secured by the perfect navigation of the Creator. Yet, as the heavy ring of keys hits the dirt, and you finally stop trying to orchestrate your own destiny, you suddenly become aware of a profound, suffocating pressure resting directly upon your chest. You are no longer trying to choose the path, but the modern world has convinced you that you must walk whatever path you are on entirely by your own strength. The rusted diving suit and the grace of dependence. There is a cold, unyielding weight pressing against your breastbone tonight, a heavy restriction that makes every single breath feel like a deliberate, exhausting labor. This is the physical consequence of living inside a culture that violently demonizes the act of leaning on anything other than yourself. The modern machine of society has constructed a towering, terrifying religion out of absolute independence. We are raised in an environment that treats vulnerability as a catastrophic moral failure. It explicitly teaches you that needing help, requiring rest, or admitting your deep internal frailty is a sign that you are unfit for survival. Society hands you the narrative of the resilient, untouchable individual, demanding that you forge your own armor, secure your own peace, and absolutely never show the world your bleeding wounds. Because of this toxic conditioning, you treat your own deep biological and spiritual need for rest as a betrayal. You spend your precious, irreplaceable, vital energy desperately trying to project an image of untouchable strength, terrified that if the world realizes how heavily you are struggling to stay afloat, you will be instantly discarded. You are lying awake, quietly drowning in the effort of trying to breathe entirely on your own. To dismantle this specific midnight suffocation, we must look at the brutal, exhausting pride that nearly destroyed Augustine before he finally submitted to salvation. In his youth, Augustine was a man intoxicated by his own intellectual supremacy. He read the great philosophers of the ancient world and believed that human reason and willpower were the absolute pinnacles of existence. When he first tried to read the scriptures, he tossed them aside in sheer disgust. He found the language too simple, too humble, and too submissive. He was entirely repulsed by the concept of grace. Because grace implies that a human being is fundamentally broken and requires a savior. Augustine wanted to be the philosopher king. He wanted to be the conqueror, not the rescued. But as the years ground his spirit down to dust, as his brilliant philosophies entirely failed to cure his crushing depression and his moral paralysis, he realized a devastating truth. His intellectual pride was not a fortress, it was a tomb. He discovered the sin of superbia, the blinding, exhausting pride that convinces a human being they can exist independently of God. He realized that the refusal to be dependent is the most agonizing, soul-crushing prison a human being can construct. This is the exact psychological torture you are enduring right now. You are currently trapped at the very bottom of a pitch-black, freezing ocean trench. To survive the immense, crushing pressure of the human-made world, you have bolted yourself inside a massive, impossibly heavy, rusted iron diving suit. The bolts are rusted shut. The thick metal visor is cracked. The air inside the helmet is rapidly becoming toxic, and you are slowly suffocating. Directly above you, resting peacefully on the surface of the water, is a massive, brilliantly illuminated rescue ship, holding an infinite, inexhaustible supply of pure, life-giving oxygen. The lifeline is already attached to your suit, but the human machine has completely brainwashed you. It screams at you through the dark water that relying on the surface for air is a humiliating weakness. It tells you that a truly successful, independent diver must chemically manufacture their own oxygen out of the freezing mud at the bottom of the sea. And so you are hyperventilating, choking on your own pride, completely paralyzed by the terror of weakness, entirely obsessed with saving yourself. You are completely ignoring the fact that if you simply unlatched the helmet and accepted the air flowing freely from the surface, you would be instantly revived. When you burn your vital energy in the dark, desperately suppressing your own frailty and fiercely protecting your independence, you are secretly committing an act of profound spiritual starvation. You are actively declaring that the flawless, perfect, infinite provision of the true sovereign is an insult to your pride. You are looking at the Creator, the one who explicitly, beautifully designed your human frame from the fragile dust of the earth to be completely, wonderfully dependent upon His breath. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, exhausted human ego can somehow manufacture a better, stronger version of reality. Wisdom reveals the breathtaking mercy hidden entirely within your absolute inability to survive on your own. The Creator absolutely did not design the human soul to be a self-contained, self-sufficient island. The human-made system engineered the illusion of absolute independence to keep you constantly isolated, striving, and alienated from true connection. But the Creator engineered your limitations, your exhaustion, and your beautiful frailty to completely, utterly free you from the crushing burden of playing God. The moments of profound burnout you have experienced, the times when you hit the absolute wall of your endurance and realize you could not take another step on your own strength, are not failures. They are flawless, intentional mercies from the Master Weaver. The oxygen of the ego must run out. The illusion of being entirely self-made must violently collapse. It is the only way you will finally stop fighting the lifeline, unlatch the rusted iron helmet of your worldly pride, and turn your exhausted lungs back to the profound, healing reality of absolute, unearned divine sustenance. To orchestrate a radical surrender of your independence, you must deliberately let the iron suit fall apart. The faint, agonizing, tightly controlled restriction in your rib cage, the heavy, dragging sensation in your upper back, and the tight, anxious shallowness of your breathing are the physical manifestations of your refusal to accept divine grace. Your body is holding on to the exhausting illusion of the untouchable soul, subconsciously bracing to hold itself together. But the night is a vast, unjudging, incredibly peaceful rescue, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally admit you are tired. You do not have to manufacture your own air tonight. You simply reach up to the rusted bolts of the heavy iron helmet and twist the latches open. You push the heavy metal visor entirely back, exposing your face to the cool, perfect, healing current of the water. The heavy, suffocating iron plates of the suit unbuckle and fall away into the dark trench, leaving you entirely weightless, utterly vulnerable, and perfectly supported. The tight, defensive, strained tension across your ribs completely, beautifully melts. The subtle, exhausting restriction in your diaphragm entirely ceases. Your chest falls heavily and softly into the mattress as you take a massive, unrestricted breath, releasing the rigid, unbending focus of your nervous system. You entirely power down your internal fortress. The desperate need to be absolutely strong completely drains from your bones. The terrifying illusion of the world's demand for independence melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute provision flowing perfectly into your lungs. You unconditionally anchor your vulnerable, exhausted existence to the magnificent, perfect sustenance of the Supreme Architect. You are completely weightless, perfectly held by the safe, unshakable currents of grace. But as the iron plates sink into the abyss and you finally take a full, unobstructed breath of peace, you notice a harsh, mechanical, grinding sound echoing in the distance. The human machine is returning, this time wielding a heavy, rusted ledger, demanding to know exactly what you have produced to justify your survival. The rusted ledger and the exhaustion of transactional worth. The harsh, mechanical, grinding sound echoing in the distance belongs to the most ruthless, inescapable debt collector ever invented, the modern economy of human worth. Even as your physical body rests in the quiet shadows of your bedroom, your mind is furiously, obsessively tallying an endless column of numbers. You lie awake, trapped in a state of paralyzing hypervigilance, desperately reviewing exactly what you produced today, what you failed to accomplish, and what you must fiercely hustle to achieve tomorrow. Modern society has conditioned you to view your entire existence through the lens of a cold, mathematical ledger. We are raised in an industrial machine that explicitly equates human breathing with a financial deficit. It teaches you that you are born into a state of debt and that your ultimate right to occupy space, to be loved, and to feel peace must be aggressively purchased through relentless, measurable productivity. The human-made system turns you into an exhausted, terrified accountant of your own soul. It forces you to mentally hoard your achievements as currency and meticulously calculate your failures as fatal bankruptcies. Because of this toxic transactional conditioning, you treat the concept of rest not as a fundamental biological right, but as a dangerous, unearned luxury. You burn your precious, irreplaceable vital energy desperately trying to force an inherently chaotic world to balance a book that was mathematically designed to keep you in the red. To understand the sheer, crushing futility of this pursuit, we must look at the spiritual economy that completely dominated the ancient Roman Empire during St. Augustine's life. Roman society was built entirely on a rigid, unforgiving system of patronage and transaction. You were only as valuable as the tribute you could pay or the favors you could provide. When Augustine first approached the concept of the divine, his mind was deeply infected by this transactional logic. He believed that the peace of the Creator was something he had to earn through a massive, exhausting accumulation of intellectual labor and moral perfection. He viewed his relationship with the universe as an exhausting negotiation. But as he carefully dismantled the illusions of the Roman machine, Augustine was struck by the breathtaking, history-altering reality of gratia, the absolute, unconditional grace of the true sovereign. Augustine realized a devastating truth about the human condition. The harder a human being tries to forcefully purchase their own salvation through earthly production, the more deeply they are plunged into a state of bitter, suffocating enslavement. He realized that a soul obsessed with earning its worth is a soul entirely devoid of peace. This is the exact psychological torment you are subjecting yourself to tonight. You are chained to a massive, splintering wooden desk deep inside a windowless, underground factory. The air is thick with smoke and the deafening roar of grinding gears. In front of you is a massive, impossibly thick ledger bound in rusted iron. The human-made system stands over your shoulder, screaming that your survival depends entirely on perfectly balancing the infinite columns of your personal and professional deficits. You are sweating, bleeding, and trembling, your fingers stained with ink, frantically writing down every single email sent, every hour worked, and every minor success, desperately trying to pay off the phantom debts of your own existence. You are entirely convinced that if you close the book for even a fraction of a second, the debt collectors will violently strip you of your identity. But the unblinking light of truth reveals a magnificent, reality-altering reality that completely dismantles the power of this factory. The supreme architect of the universe absolutely does not use a ledger. When you exhaust yourself trying to balance the accounts of your life, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual arrogance. You are actively declaring that the flawless, infinite, unearned mercy of the Creator is somehow subject to the petty, cruel, transactional laws of human commerce. You are looking at the true sovereign, the one who operates exclusively on an economy of absolute, bottomless grace, where debts are not balanced, but completely, flawlessly obliterated. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, exhausted, hyper-productive human hands need to enforce a rigid accounting system to keep the universe from discarding you. Augustine realized that the modern demand for productivity as a measure of worth is an invention of the ego designed to keep you permanently exhausted and perpetually enslaved to the machine. The human system demands transactional worth because it requires your infinite labor to sustain itself. But the Creator offers you something infinitely superior to a wage. He offers you a gift. He explicitly designed your soul to possess infinite, unshakable value, regardless of what you produce in the dirt of the earth. The moments of profound, burning inadequacy you have experienced, the times when you completely failed to meet your quotas and realized you could not physically work hard enough to silence the critic in your head, are not signs that you are worthless. They are flawless, intentional interventions by the master weaver. The math of the world must fail you. The ink must run dry. The ledgers must burn. It is the only way you will finally stop carrying the heavy, rusted iron of your own perceived deficits and turn your exhausted heart toward the profound, healing reality of unconditional, unearned clearance. To break free from this exhausting cycle, you must orchestrate a radical, internal resignation from the factory floor. You must deliberately step away from the desk, the hard, tight restriction in the very center of your chest, the heavy, dragging sensation in your forearms, and the way your fingers are curled inward are the physical manifestations of your refusal to drop the pen. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom accountant, subconsciously bracing to tally another day of failures. But the night around you is a vast, unjudging, infinitely wealthy sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally declare bankruptcy on the world's demands. The dark does not require an accounting of your day. As you surrender the desperate need to prove your worth, your hands simply open. The heavy, rusted pen slips from your fingers and clatters onto the desk. You step back, turning completely away from the massive iron ledger, entirely abandoning the frantic mathematics of the ego. The defensive, rigid tension in your shoulders completely, beautifully dissolves. The exhausting, cramp-like restriction in your hands entirely ceases. Your arms fall heavily and softly into the mattress, entirely powering down your internal producer. The desperate need to be transactionally valuable drains entirely from your nervous system. The terrifying illusion of the world's ledger instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute grace flowing perfectly into the infinite canyon of your soul. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to purchase your right to exist. Your worth is flawlessly, permanently secured by the unconditional love of the Supreme Architect. Yet, as the deafening roar of the factory fades into absolute silence, and you step out into the quiet, unearned peace of grace, you suddenly notice a restless, vibrating current of electricity humming directly behind your eyes. You have stopped trying to produce, but the modern world has trained your intellect to act as a bottomless supercomputer, and your brain simply cannot stop furiously searching for answers. The infinite archive and the exhaustion of the intellect. There is a frantic, buzzing weight located at the very front of your skull tonight, a restless, high-frequency vibration that completely refuses to power down. It is the specific, entirely modern exhaustion of a mind that has consumed far too much information. Even as your body lies perfectly still, your brain is violently thrashing, frantically trying to process the endless, chaotic stream of data, news cycles, opinions, and complex strategies you absorbed throughout your waking hours. Modern society has engineered a culture of absolute, suffocating intellectual gluttony. We are raised in a digital machine that explicitly teaches us that safety is found in omniscience. It commands you to constantly optimize your knowledge, to stay endlessly informed on every global catastrophe, to read the latest self-help methodologies, and to fundamentally believe that if you can just acquire enough data, you will finally decode the secret to a painless life. The human-made system turns your fragile, beautiful human consciousness into a frantic, bottomless filing cabinet. It tells you that mystery is dangerous, that uncertainty is a fatal threat, and that your ultimate survival is intrinsically tied to your ability to intellectually outmaneuver the unpredictable universe. Because of this toxic conditioning, you treat your own brain as if it were a machine tasked with solving the unanswerable riddle of existence. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy desperately scrolling, searching, overthinking, and analyzing, terrified that if you stop processing information for even a fraction of a second, the world will blindside you in the dark. To dismantle this terrifying intellectual claustrophobia, we must look at a man who possessed one of the most towering, ravenous, and aggressively restless intellects in the history of the world. In his youth, St. Augustine was a voracious, insatiable consumer of information. He was utterly obsessed with philosophy, astrology, literature, and the natural sciences. He scoured the great libraries of Carthage, obsessively reading the Platonists, the academics, and the Cicero manuscripts, desperately trying to construct a flawless, purely intellectual map of the universe. He believed with his entire soul that if he could just read enough scrolls, if he could just master enough complex theories and compile enough raw data, he would finally secure absolute peace of mind. But at the absolute pinnacle of his scholarly pursuits, surrounded by the greatest texts of antiquity, recognized as a genius by his peers, he realized he was fundamentally suffocating. His brain was bursting with data, but his soul was starving to death in the cold. Augustine recognized a profound, devastating truth. The human intellect is a magnificent tool, but it is a horrific, tyrannical master. This is the exact psychological labyrinth you are trapped inside tonight. You are wandering entirely alone through the aisles of a massive, infinitely sprawling underground archive. The towering wooden shelves stretch up into the pitch-black darkness, completely overflowing with millions of dusty, decaying scrolls and frantic, flashing digital screens. The modern machine has locked you in this windowless library and promised you that the exact map to your happiness and security is hidden somewhere in these pages. And so you are sprinting down the aisles, your eyes bloodshot, your vision blurring, frantically speed-reading fragments of text in the dim, harsh light. You are completely paralyzed by the sheer terror of information overload, entirely obsessed with acquiring more data, completely ignoring the terrifying fact that the archive has absolutely no exit and the air inside is completely stale. When you exhaust yourself trying to intellectually decode the infinite mystery of your life, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual rebellion. You are actively declaring that the flawless, simple, and compounded truth of the true sovereign is somehow hidden behind human complexity. You are looking at the Creator, the one who designed the vast, silent majesty of the cosmos, the one whose absolute peace completely surpasses all human logic, and you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, data-addicted human brain is required to intellectually process the infinite. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of endless information is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you perpetually distracted from the breathtaking simplicity of surrender. The human machine demands that you know everything because it fundamentally lacks faith in the unseen. But the Creator does not ask you to comprehend the universe. He asks you to trust the one who sustains it. True wisdom is not the accumulation of facts. It is the profound, beautiful humility of recognizing the limits of the human mind. The specific moments of profound mental burnout you feel, the times when the sheer volume of opinions, theories, and unanswerable questions causes your brain to simply short-circuit, are not intellectual failures. They are the flawless, biological alarms of a mind that was meant to rest in mystery, not to conquer it. The illusion of intellectual supremacy must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop sprinting through the dusty aisles, drop the heavy, decaying scrolls of human logic, and turn your exhausted intellect toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine truth. To orchestrate a radical surrender of your intellect, you must deliberately walk out of the archive. The restless, vibrating current of electricity humming behind your eyes, the subtle furrowing of your brow, and the tight, anxious tension wrapping around the base of your skull are the physical manifestations of your refusal to stop thinking. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom scholar, subconsciously bracing to solve one last problem in the dark. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally lay down the burden of knowing. You do not have to figure out the universe tonight. As you surrender the desperate need for intellectual control, your tense, frantic gaze softens. The dusty scroll slips from your hands and hits the stone floor. You turn away from the towering, suffocating shelves of the human machine, entirely abandoning the labyrinth of overthinking. The tight, defensive, strained tension behind your eyes completely, beautifully melts. The subtle, exhausting furrow in your brow entirely smooths out. Your head sinks heavily and softly deep into the pillow, entirely powering down your internal supercomputer. The desperate need to endlessly process information completely drains from your skull. The terrifying illusion of the world's infinite data instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute, uncompounded peace, flowing perfectly into the canyon of your soul. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to intellectually outmaneuver existence. Your mind is completely unburdened. The chaotic noise of the intellect is entirely over. But as the flashing screens of the archive go completely dark and your brain finally powers down into peaceful silence, you slowly begin to notice the heavy, undeniably vulnerable sensation of your physical body resting on the mattress. You are no longer thinking, but the modern world has convinced you that the physical shell you inhabit is a fragile, betraying machine that must be violently defended against the uncontrollable forces of nature. The rusted mechanism and the theology of the fragile shell. There is a distinct, deeply unsettling vulnerability that courses through your veins when you lie perfectly still and suddenly become hyper-aware of the physical beating of your own heart. In the absolute quiet of the night, you feel the subtle, unavoidable aches in your joints, the shallow rhythm of your breathing, and the terrifying, undeniable reality that the physical shell you inhabit is profoundly fragile. The modern world has completely weaponized this biological reality. We exist inside a highly lucrative, entirely ruthless societal machine that treats the human body not as a sacred temporary vessel, but as a defective mechanism that must be constantly hacked, optimized, and violently frozen in time. Society explicitly teaches you that physical aging is a personal failure, that exhaustion is a sign of weakness, and that absolute, untouchable physical perfection can be bought if you simply consume the right supplements, execute the perfect routine, and frantically fight the laws of nature. Because of this deeply toxic conditioning, you treat your own physical body as if it is an enemy that is constantly betraying you. You lie awake, scanning your biology for flaws, obsessively calculating your longevity, and burning your irreplaceable vital energy, utterly terrified of the inevitable decay of your own cells. You are trapped in a state of quiet desperation, trying to force a fragile earthly machine to perform with the absolute indestructibility of a god. To understand the sheer, soul-crushing futility of this war against your own biology, we must look at a man who lived in an era of rampant disease, brutal physical hardship, and constant bodily suffering. During his early philosophical journey, Saint Augustine was deeply seduced by Neoplatonism and Manichaeism, two dominant ancient philosophies that absolutely despised the physical body. They taught a toxic lie that perfectly mirrors our modern anti-aging obsession. They claimed that the physical flesh was a disgusting, evil prison, a degrading trap that the pure intellect had to aggressively conquer and despise. For years, Augustine viewed his own biological desires, his illnesses, and his physical limitations with profound shame and aggressive hostility. But as his understanding of the Supreme Architect deepened, Augustine experienced a massive theological earthquake that completely shattered his hatred of the flesh. He looked at the flawless, brilliant design of the Creator and realized a magnificent truth. The human body is not an evil prison, nor is it meant to be an indestructible idol. It is a masterpiece of temporary architecture. It is inherently beautifully good because it was crafted by the hands of the true sovereign. But it is entirely intentionally designed to be temporary. This is the exact psychological torture you are inflicting upon yourself tonight. You are standing in the center of a blistering underground forge, desperately working over a massive anvil. The modern machine has handed you a fragile, intricately carved wooden clock and commanded you to violently beat it with a heavy iron hammer until it magically transforms into solid, indestructible titanium. Every time the wood splinters, every time the delicate gears groan under the sheer force of your blows, you panic. You are drenched in sweat, completely paralyzed by the terror of the breaking wood, obsessively trying to hammer immortality into a material that was explicitly designed to return to the earth. You are ignoring the breathtaking fact that the master weaver never asked you to make the wood last forever. He simply asked you to use it to tell the time until you are called home. When you exhaust yourself, agonizing over your physical vulnerability, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual amnesia. You are actively declaring that the flawless, eternal resurrection promised by the true sovereign is somehow insufficient, and that you must frantically build an immortal kingdom out of shifting dust. You are looking at the Creator, the one who intentionally clothed your eternal soul in fragile clay so that you would intimately know the beauty of depending on His strength. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, exhausted, biohacking human ego can somehow outsmart the ancient, perfect laws of nature. Augustine realized that the modern demand for physical indestructibility is an invention of the ego, designed to keep you perpetually terrified of your own mortality. The human machine demands that you worship the shell because it profits massively from your fear of losing it. But the Creator offers you something infinitely superior to physical optimization. He offers you the promise of a glorified, eternal form that requires absolutely zero maintenance. The specific moments of profound physical exhaustion you feel, the times when your body aches, when your energy completely bottoms out, and you realize you cannot physically push yourself any harder, are not signs of biological failure. They are flawless, intentional mercies. The machinery must wind down. The illusion of your physical invincibility must violently collapse. It is the only way you will finally stop swinging the heavy iron hammer. Step away from the blinding heat of the anvil and turn your exhausted soul toward the profound, healing reality of the Creator's eternal protection. To break free from this exhausting physical hypervigilance, you must orchestrate a radical internal resignation from the forge. The tight, anxious monitoring of your own heartbeat, the subtle bracing of your muscles against the mattress, and the desperate need to feel physically untouchable are the physical manifestations of your refusal to accept your own beautiful frailty. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the frantic mechanic. But the vast, unjudging sanctuary of the night explicitly offers you the profound permission to finally let the wooden clock rest. As you surrender the desperate need to be biologically indestructible, your grip on the heavy iron hammer simply loosens. The tool slips from your exhausted hands and clatters against the stone floor of the forge. You completely step back from the anvil, abandoning the frantic, impossible alchemy of the ego. The rigid, defensive tension across your limbs completely, beautifully dissolves. The heavy, exhaustive need to police your own biology entirely ceases. You allow your body to simply be exactly what it is: a heavy, beautifully fragile, temporary vessel sinking deeply and softly into the mattress. You entirely power down your internal mechanic. The terrifying illusion of the world's demand for physical perfection instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute grace, flowing perfectly into your bones. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to forge immortality out of the dust. Your ultimate physical safety is flawlessly, permanently secured, not by your diets or your vigilance, but by the perfect, resurrecting power of the Supreme Architect. Yet, as the deafening ringing of the hammer fades into absolute silence, and you finally accept the profound peace of your own frailty, your mind begins to reach frantically outward. You have stopped trying to perfectly control your own shell, but the modern world has convinced you that you must act as the absolute sovereign over the lives of the people around you. The razor wire strings and the exhaustion of the savior complex. The moment your mind relinquishes control over your own physical vulnerabilities, it violently pivots to the heavy, crushing anxieties you carry for other people. Even as the room around you remains perfectly still, your intellect is furiously calculating the emotional state, the choices, and the safety of your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Modern society has engineered a culture of absolute, suffocating hyper-responsibility. We are raised in a psychological machine that explicitly equates human love with total, sovereign control. It teaches you that if someone you care about fails, suffers, or walks down a destructive path, it is a direct result of your inability to flawlessly manage their existence. The human-made system turns your fragile, beautiful capacity for empathy into a frantic, bottomless well of guilt. It tells you that boundaries are a betrayal, that surrender is abandonment, and that your ultimate worth as a parent, a partner, or a friend is intrinsically tied to your ability to intellectually outmaneuver the suffering of other human beings. Because of this toxic conditioning, you treat your own heart as if it is a universal safety net. You burn your irreplaceable, vital energy, desperately intervening, over-explaining, and attempting to artificially orchestrate the lives of autonomous souls, terrified that if you drop your vigilance for even a fraction of a second, the people you love will be instantly destroyed. To dismantle this terrifying emotional claustrophobia, we must look at a man who was entirely paralyzed by the desperate need to save the people he loved, and a mother who nearly destroyed herself trying to save him. Saint Augustine's mother, Monica, spent decades weeping, agonizing, and violently trying to control her son's chaotic life, believing that her frantic interventions were the only thing keeping him from the abyss. Later in his life, Augustine himself experienced this exact same agonizing weight when he looked at his own brilliant, beloved son, Adeodatus. Augustine wanted nothing more than to perfectly shield his son from the ruthless, crushing violence of the late Roman world. But when his son tragically passed away at a young age, Augustine was forced into a profound, devastating confrontation with the absolute limits of human love. He recognized a staggering, reality-altering truth. No human being possesses the architectural capacity to be the savior of another soul. To attempt to play God in the lives of the people you love is not an act of devotion. It is a horrific, tyrannical, exhausting burden that destroys both the Savior and the saved. This is the exact psychological labyrinth you are trapped inside tonight. You are standing entirely alone on a pitch-black theatrical stage. Suspended from your hands are thousands of heavy, intricate strings made of tightly coiled razor wire. These strings are directly attached to the limbs, the minds, and the hearts of every single person you care about. The modern machine has locked you on this stage and told you that the safety and happiness of the entire cast depends exclusively on your ability to perfectly pull the strings. And so, you are frantically jerking your arms, your hands bleeding deeply from the razor wire, desperately trying to keep everyone standing upright, trying to force them to hit their marks, completely terrified of what will happen if they stumble. You are completely paralyzed by the sheer terror of their potential failure, entirely obsessed with maintaining control, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that you were never hired to be the director of this play. When you exhaust yourself trying to emotionally orchestrate the destiny of other human beings, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual rebellion. You are actively declaring that the flawless, omniscient, all-encompassing providence of the true sovereign is somehow insufficient to care for his own creations. You are looking at the Creator, the one who designed the vast, silent majesty of every single human heart, the one whose absolute love for your family infinitely surpasses your own, and you are arrogant enough to believe that you're panicked, heavily exhausted, desperately controlling human hands are required to keep them safe. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of emotional control is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you perpetually distracted from the breathtaking freedom of total surrender. The human machine demands that you carry the weight of the world because it fundamentally lacks faith in the master weaver. But the Creator does not ask you to carry the souls of your loved ones. He asks you to hand them over to the one who actually possesses the strength to hold them. True love is not the violent pulling of razor wire strings. It is the profound, beautiful humility of releasing those you love into the absolute custody of divine grace. The specific moments of profound emotional burnout you feel, the times when you realize you cannot force someone to change, when you cannot shield them from the consequences of the earth and your heart simply breaks under the weight, are not failures of your love. They are the flawless, biological alarms of a soul that was meant to be a fellow passenger, not the driver. The illusion of your savior complex must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop bleeding on the stage, drop the heavy, agonizing strings of human control, and turn your exhausted empathy toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine jurisdiction. To orchestrate a radical surrender of your emotional control, you must deliberately drop the marionette crossbar, the restless, vibrating current of anxiety humming in your chest, the subtle clenching of your fists, and the tight, anxious tension wrapping around your throat are the physical manifestations of your refusal to let go. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom puppeteer, subconsciously bracing to save someone who belongs to God. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally lay down the burden of orchestration. You do not have to figure out their lives tonight. As you surrender the desperate need for emotional control, your tense, bleeding hands finally soften. The heavy razor wire strings slip from your fingers and pool harmlessly onto the wooden stage. You completely step back from the blinding lights of the human machine, entirely abandoning the frantic, impossible labor of controlling autonomous souls. The tight, defensive, strained tension across your hands and chest completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to endlessly manage the universe completely drains from your heart. The terrifying illusion of the world's infinite emotional demands instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute peace, flowing perfectly into the canyon of your soul. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to be the savior of the world. Your heart is completely unburdened. The chaotic noise of emotional hyper-responsibility is entirely over. Yet, as the heavy strings fall away and you find yourself standing completely unbothered on the empty stage, your mind frantically begins to search for one final, elusive metric. Now that you have dropped the physical world and released the people you love, the modern machine demands that you actively, forcefully conquer the very concept of peace itself, treating relaxation as just another brutal quota you must perfectly achieve. The iron bow and the weaponization of peace. There is a particularly cruel, entirely paradoxical exhaustion that grips you when you are desperately trying to force yourself to relax. You lie in the shadows, fiercely monitoring your own breathing, brutally grading your ability to clear your mind, and treating the very concept of peace as just another ruthless metric you must successfully crush. The modern world has completely commodified the human soul's need for rest. We are trapped inside a hyper-optimized machine that has taken the sacred, ancient concept of stillness and twisted it into a competitive sport. Society hands you sleep trackers, meditation quotas, and rigid wellness routines, explicitly teaching you that tranquility is a high-value target that must be actively hunted, captured, and conquered through sheer, relentless willpower. The human-made system convinces you that if you are restless, it is simply because your relaxation strategy is insufficiently aggressive. Because of this toxic conditioning, you approach your own bed as if it is a battlefield. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately trying to violently wrestle your nervous system into submission. Absolutely terrified that your inability to instantly fall asleep is a catastrophic personal failure. You are drowning in the agonizing effort of trying to physically strangle the universe into giving you peace. To understand the absolute futility of this midnight war, we must examine a man who spent the first half of his life violently trying to seize spiritual enlightenment by the throat. Before his profound surrender, St. Augustine was heavily influenced by the Platonists, brilliant, arrogant philosophers who believed that the human mind could independently ascend to the divine through rigorous, agonizing intellectual force. Augustine spent years attempting to forcefully push his consciousness upward, desperately trying to manually grasp the untouchable light of the Creator. He treated grace as a trophy that could be won if he simply strained his mental muscles hard enough. But every single time he tried to seize the divine light, he violently crashed back down to earth, shattered, exhausted, and more alienated than before. He recorded this devastating realization in his writings. He discovered that you cannot hunt peace. He realized that the magnificent, infinite grace of the true sovereign is not a fortress to be violently besieged by the human ego. It is a gentle, descending dew that can only be caught by open, completely empty hands. This is the exact psychological torment you are inflicting upon yourself tonight. You are standing entirely alone in the center of a dead, freezing forest. The modern machine has handed you a massive, impossibly heavy iron bow and a quiver full of heavy steel arrows. It points to the brilliant, perfectly calm, glowing moon hanging in the night sky, and tells you that if you want peace, you must shoot it down. And so, you are standing in the freezing dark, your arms shaking violently, drawing the heavy iron bowstring back with every ounce of strength you possess. The rough bowstring is cutting deeply into your fingers. The muscles in your back are screaming in agony, and you are sweating profusely, completely paralyzed by the desperate need to hit the target. You are entirely obsessed with conquering the sky, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that the moon is already bathing you in its perfect, unearned light, and your frantic, violent arrows cannot possibly reach it. When you exhaust yourself trying to forcefully manufacture your own tranquility, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual arrogance. You are actively declaring that the flawless, descending, unconditional peace of the true sovereign must be violently extracted from him by your own human effort. You are looking at the Creator, the one who explicitly designed his rest to be a completely free, unmerited gift, and you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, exhausted, hyper-vigilant human ego can somehow capture his infinite serenity in a net. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of optimized wellness is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you perpetually working even when you are supposed to be resting. The human machine demands that you aggressively hunt for sleep because it fundamentally cannot comprehend the concept of grace. But the Creator does not ask you to conquer the night. He asks you to surrender your weapons to the one who owns the dark. True, unshakable peace is not the violent drawing of an iron bow. It is the profound, beautiful humility of recognizing that you cannot shoot down the stars. The specific moments of profound, restless insomnia you feel, the times when the harder you try to sleep, the more violently awake your brain becomes, are not biological failures. They are the flawless, intentional alarms of a soul that was meant to receive rest, not to pillage it. The illusion of your ability to forcefully conquer peace must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop bleeding in the dark. Drop the heavy, agonizing weapon of your own willpower and turn your exhausted body toward the unshakable, descending certainty of divine rest. To orchestrate a radical surrender of this exhausting pursuit, you must deliberately unstring the weapon. The restless, vibrating current of tension humming across your upper back, the subtle locking of your shoulders, and the tight, anxious restriction in your forearms are the physical manifestations of your refusal to stop trying. Your nervous system is holding onto the cruel illusion of the phantom archer, subconsciously bracing to launch one last desperate arrow into the dark. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally stop hunting. You do not have to achieve sleep tonight. As you surrender the desperate need to actively conquer your own relaxation, your tense, bleeding fingers finally soften. The heavy iron bowstring slips from your grasp with a soft, releasing snap. The massive iron weapon drops from your hands and falls harmlessly into the damp soil of the forest floor. You completely step back from the exhausting, impossible labor of trying to manually pull the heavens down to earth. The defensive, strained tension across your back and shoulders completely, beautifully dissolves. The desperate need to aggressively monitor your own state of mind entirely drains from your consciousness. The terrifying illusion of the world's demand for optimized rest instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute peace flowing perfectly over your exhausted form. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to forcefully steal the grace of the Supreme Architect. Your mind is completely unburdened from the pressure of performance. The chaotic noise of trying to force yourself to sleep is entirely over. Yet, as the heavy iron bow rusts in the dirt and the silence of the forest settles around you, you begin to notice the massive, terrifying weight of the ground beneath your feet. You are no longer trying to shoot the sky, but the modern machine whispers from the shadows that if you stop actively worrying, the very earth you are standing on will fundamentally collapse. The crumbling pillar and the illusion of the Atlas soul. The moment you finally release your grip on your own personal performance, an entirely different, incredibly heavy dread attempts to hijack your mind. It is the deeply ingrained, agonizing belief that your constant, churning anxiety is the only thing keeping your entire world from falling apart. Even as the physical room remains perfectly quiet, your intellect furiously convinces you that if you do not actively worry about your finances, your career, your loved ones, and the state of society, catastrophic ruin will immediately follow. Modern society has engineered a culture of absolute suffocating terror regarding the fragility of human existence. We are raised in a psychological machine that explicitly equates obsessive worrying with moral responsibility. It teaches you that disaster is always imminent and that the only way to prevent the total collapse of your life is to mentally bear the weight of every possible worst-case scenario. The human-made system turns your capacity for foresight into a frantic, crushing burden. It tells you that if you actually relax, if you truly let your guard down and trust the universe, you are being negligent and naive. Because of this toxic conditioning, you treat your own exhausting anxiety as if it were a load-bearing pillar holding up the roof of your existence. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately bracing against invisible disasters, entirely terrified that if you drop your vigilance for even a fraction of a second, the sky will literally crush you and everyone you love. To dismantle this terrifying, world-carrying megalomania, we must look at a man who literally watched the greatest, most unshakable empire in human history violently collapse into dust. In the year 410 AD, the unimaginable happened. The city of Rome was sacked by the Visigoths. For centuries, citizens believed that Rome was the, quote, eternal city, the absolute load-bearing center of civilization. When it fell, massive waves of panic, despair, and apocalyptic terror swept across the world. People believed the entire cosmos was shattering. St. Augustine watched this profound, terrifying collapse, but instead of succumbing to the panic, he retreated to his desk and spent 13 years writing his magnificent masterpiece, The City of God. Augustine recognized a staggering, reality-altering truth in the ruins of the empire. The structures built by human hands are entirely fragile, destined to crumble, and utterly incapable of holding up the universe. He drew a brilliant, permanent line between the civitas terrena, the city of man, and the civitas Dei, the city of God. He realized that human beings are exhaustingly obsessed with holding up the temporary, rotting pillars of their earthly lives, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that the true sovereign, effortlessly, flawlessly, sustains the eternal architecture of the cosmos without requiring a single ounce of human anxiety. This is the exact psychological labyrinth you are trapped inside tonight. You are standing entirely alone in the center of an ancient, decaying marble temple. The ceiling is massive, impossibly heavy, and covered in deep, terrifying cracks. The modern machine has locked you in this crumbling ruin and told you that you are the final remaining pillar. It tells you that your constant, obsessive worrying is the only force keeping the thousands of tons of stone from collapsing. And so, you are standing with your arms thrust violently upward, your spine bowing under the crushing pressure, your knees shaking uncontrollably, desperately trying to manually hold up the roof of your own life. You are completely paralyzed by the sheer terror of being crushed, entirely obsessed with maintaining the structural integrity of the temple, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that the ceiling above you is just painted plaster, and outside the ruin, the actual sky is flawlessly held in place by the hand of the Creator. When you exhaust yourself trying to mentally sustain the universe through your anxiety, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual rebellion. You are actively declaring that the flawless, omniscient, all-encompassing providence of the true sovereign is somehow asleep, and that he requires your panic to keep the world spinning. You are looking at the Creator, the one who effortlessly spoke the burning galaxies into existence, the one who intimately numbers the hairs on your head. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, desperately bracing human mind is the actual glue holding your life together. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of anxious control is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to trick you into believing you possess the power of a god. The human machine demands that you carry the weight of the world because it fundamentally denies the existence of the master weaver. But the Creator does not ask you to be Atlas. He asks you to step out from under the crumbling stone and rest in the architecture He has already secured. True safety is not the violent, agonizing bracing of a marble pillar. It is the profound, beautiful humility of realizing that the world does not rest on your shoulders. The specific moments of profound existential dread you feel, the times when the sheer weight of your responsibilities brings you to your knees and you realize you cannot physically hold it all together, are not failures of your endurance. They are the flawless biological alarms of a creature that was meant to be a resident of the universe, not its architect. The illusion of your world-carrying anxiety must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop trembling in the ruins. Drop your arms. Step away from the heavy, agonizing weight of human control and turn your exhausted posture toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine support. To orchestrate a radical surrender of your crushing anxiety, you must deliberately step out from under the ceiling. The restless, vibrating current of pressure humming in your spine, the subtle locking of your neck, and the tight, anxious tension wrapping around your chest are the physical manifestations of your refusal to let go. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom pillar, subconsciously bracing to catch the falling sky. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally lay down the burden of the world. You do not have to hold up the universe tonight. As you surrender the desperate need for anxious control, your tense, trembling arms finally lower. You step entirely out from under the cracking plaster of the human machine, completely abandoning the frantic, impossible labor of carrying the earth. You walk out of the ruined temple and stand under the vast, brilliantly clear, infinite canopy of the Creator's perfectly sustained night sky. The defensive, strained tension across your spine and neck completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to endlessly worry about tomorrow completely drains from your chest. The terrifying illusion of the world's infinite weight instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute strength flowing perfectly into the canyon of your soul. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to be the structural support of your own existence. Your entire being is completely unburdened. The chaotic noise of global anxiety is entirely over. The sky is perfectly held. The world is flawlessly sustained. And your fragile, magnificent human form is beautifully, peacefully ready to let the gentle, massive, irresistible tide of the universe carry you softly and deeply into the quiet sanctuary of the next revelation. The hand-cranked sun and the exhaustion of manufactured light. There is a hollow, deeply cynical burnout that settles into your chest when you are completely depleted of motivation, but the world demands that you continue to shine. You lie in the dark, entirely stripped of emotional energy, yet your mind furiously searches for a way to artificially generate tomorrow's enthusiasm. Modern society has engineered a profoundly toxic culture of mandatory radiance. We are raised inside a psychological machine that explicitly teaches us to be our own absolute source of light, truth, and energy. It commands you to radiate good vibes, to find your inner truth, and to constantly project an aura of unshakable positivity. The human-made system turns your fragile, beautiful spirit into an industrial power plant. It tells you that if you feel dark, if you feel depressed, or if you lack the burning drive to produce, it is a catastrophic failure of your own willpower. Because of this relentless conditioning, You treat your own limited human psychology as if it were a limitless star. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately trying to artificially manufacture inspiration, completely terrified that if you stop forcing yourself to be luminous for even a fraction of a second, you will plunge yourself and everyone around you into absolute, freezing darkness. To dismantle this terrifying emotional claustrophobia, we must look at a man who possessed one of the most brilliant minds in history, yet realized his own mind was fundamentally incapable of generating the truth. During his profound intellectual journey, Saint Augustine wrestled with the concept of human understanding. The philosophers of his era believed that the human intellect was a self-contained, self-illuminating God. But Augustine, looking closely at his own periods of profound depression, spiritual blindness, and intellectual exhaustion, realized a staggering, reality-altering truth. The human mind does not generate light, it only receives it. Augustine formulated the magnificent doctrine of divine illumination. He realized that the human intellect is merely an eye, and the truth of the Creator is the sun. Just as the physical eye is completely useless and blind in a pitch-black room, regardless of how perfectly it is constructed, the human soul is entirely blind without the unearned, descending light of the Supreme Architect. We are not the sun. We are simply the windows. This is the exact psychological torment you are enduring tonight. You are standing at the bottom of a massive, freezing, pitch-black underground cavern. The modern machine has handed you an incredibly heavy, rusted, hand-cranked iron generator, wired to a single, harsh, flickering electric bulb. It tells you that your survival depends exclusively on keeping that bulb glowing. And so, you are standing in the damp dark, your shoulders screaming in agony, your hands blistered and bleeding, violently turning the heavy iron crank. You are panting, weeping with sheer physical exhaustion, completely paralyzed by the terror of the encroaching shadows. You are entirely obsessed with generating your own visibility, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that directly above you, hidden just beyond the cavern ceiling, the actual, infinite, life-giving sun is already fully risen and waiting to pour into the space. When you exhaust yourself trying to emotionally and spiritually manufacture your own light, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual arrogance. You are actively declaring that the flawless, infinite, uncreated light of the true sovereign is somehow unavailable, and that you must frantically wire your own nervous system to keep the universe illuminated. You are looking at the Creator, the one who effortlessly spoke the dawn into existence, the one who explicitly designed you to be a receiver of His grace. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, desperately cranking human ego is the actual source of truth and joy. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of self-generated motivation is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you perpetually working on the impossible task of being your own God. The human machine demands that you turn the crank because it fundamentally denies the existence of the unseen sun. But the Creator does not ask you to generate the dawn. He asks you to step out of the artificial cavern and stand in the light He has already provided. True spiritual vitality is not the violent, agonizing turning of an iron crank. It is the profound, beautiful humility of realizing that you were never meant to be the source of your own fire. The specific moments of profound, hollow burnout you feel. The times when you simply cannot force yourself to care. When the artificial positivity completely fails and you crash into the dark, are not moral failures. They are the flawless biological alarms of a creature that was meant to reflect light, not to combust its own finite fuel to create it. The illusion of your self-illuminating ego must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop bleeding in the cavern, let go of the heavy, agonizing iron crank, and turn your exhausted face upward toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine illumination. The restless, vibrating current of pressure humming in your shoulders, the subtle locking of your jaw, and the tight, anxious tension wrapping around your chest are the physical manifestations of your refusal to let go of the machine. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom generator, subconsciously bracing to force another spark of energy out of your depleted core. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally let the artificial bulb die. You do not have to generate your own hope tonight. As you surrender the desperate need for emotional production, your tense, trembling hands finally slip from the heavy iron crank. The rusted wheel grinds to a halt. The harsh, flickering artificial bulb pops and completely burns out, plunging the human-made machine into absolute silence. You step entirely away from the exhausting, impossible labor of being your own son. At that exact moment, the massive, heavy stone ceiling of the cavern silently slides open, revealing a vast, infinite, brilliantly clear canopy of the Creator's perfectly sustained starlight, pouring effortlessly over your exhausted form. The defensive, strained tension across your arms and neck completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to endlessly motivate yourself completely drains from your chest. The terrifying illusion of the world's demand for mandatory radiance instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute truth flowing perfectly into the canyon of your soul. Your entire being is completely unburdened. The chaotic noise of forced positivity is entirely over. The light is perfectly given. The truth is flawlessly sustained, and your fragile, magnificent human form is beautifully, peacefully relieved. Yet, as the gentle, unearned light fills the space and your eyes begin to adjust to the truth, the illumination suddenly reveals the vast, sprawling architecture of your own desires. You are no longer trying to create the light, but the clarity exposes the thousands of things you have been desperately chasing in the dark, leading the mind directly into another terrifying, exhausting labyrinth. The saltwater goblets and the exhaustion of earthly thirst. The moment the unearned light reveals the interior of your mind, a deep, restless ache begins to claw at the very center of your stomach. Even as your body attempts to rest, your spirit is consumed by a frantic, insatiable craving for more. You lie awake, mentally cataloging the experiences you haven't had, the possessions you haven't acquired, and the intense emotional highs you are desperately trying to replicate. Modern society has engineered a culture of absolute, suffocating gluttony of the soul. We are raised in a hyper-consumerist machine that explicitly equates human fulfillment with the endless accumulation of novel experiences and material pleasures. It teaches you that the profound, burning emptiness in your chest is simply a sign that you have not yet found the perfect relationship, purchased the perfect home, or achieved the perfect milestone. The human-made system turns your magnificent divine capacity for love into a frantic, bottomless void. It tells you that the next purchase, the next vacation, or the next dopamine hit will finally be the one that satisfies the ache. Because of this toxic conditioning, you treat your own desires as if they are wild hounds that must be constantly fed. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately sprinting from one temporary thrill to another, entirely terrified that if you stop chasing the horizon for even a fraction of a second, you will be consumed by an unbearable, crushing boredom. To dismantle this terrifying treadmill of desire, we must look at a man who chased the pleasures of the earth more violently and passionately than almost anyone in history. Before his conversion, St. Augustine was a resident of Carthage, a bustling cosmopolitan city that he famously described as a hissing cauldron of unholy loves. Augustine pursued everything the ancient world had to offer: elite social status, theatrical entertainment, intense romantic affairs, and the absolute heights of sensory pleasure. He violently threw his entire soul into the things of the earth, entirely convinced that if he just consumed enough of the world, he would finally feel full. But at the absolute peak of his worldly indulgence, surrounded by the finest luxuries and the most intoxicating relationships, he realized he was fundamentally dying of thirst. The more he consumed, the emptier he became. Augustine recognized a staggering, reality-altering truth about the human condition. He had fallen into the trap of disordered love, ordo amoris. He realized that the human heart is explicitly designed to love the Creator above all things, and to love the things of the earth only in relation to the Creator. When a human being attempts to extract infinite, divine satisfaction from finite, created objects, the soul becomes violently diseased. This is the exact psychological labyrinth you are sprinting through tonight. You are trapped inside a massive, endlessly sprawling, mirrored maze. The walls are reflecting 1,000 different fragmented versions of yourself. Spaced out along the corridors are beautiful, intricately carved, gilded goblets filled to the brim. The modern machine has locked you in this labyrinth and told you that one of these cups holds the elixir of absolute satisfaction. And so, you are frantically running down the mirrored halls, your throat parched, your lungs burning, lifting goblet after goblet to your lips. But the cups are filled entirely with heavy, stinging salt water. Every time you drink, the agonizing burning in your throat intensifies. You are sweating, weeping with sheer physical exhaustion, completely paralyzed by the terror of your own thirst, entirely obsessed with finding the next cup, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that you are drinking the very poison that is killing you. When you exhaust yourself trying to forcefully extract ultimate satisfaction from the temporary things of the world, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual rebellion. You are actively declaring that the flawless, infinite, living water of the true sovereign is somehow insufficient, and that the decaying, rusting dust of the earth can somehow quench an eternal soul. You are looking at the Creator, the one who explicitly designed the things of the world to be beautiful signs pointing back to Him, rather than idols to be worshipped. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, desperately consuming human ego can somehow wring eternity out of a temporary object. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of endless acquisition is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you perpetually drinking the salt water of the human machine. The societal system demands that you chase the horizon because an unquenchable consumer is the perfect, obedient subject. But the Creator does not ask you to drain the oceans of the earth. He asks you to step out of the labyrinth and kneel beside the eternal spring. True satisfaction is not the violent, agonizing sprinting from one worldly pleasure to another. It is the profound, beautiful humility of realizing that the earth was never meant to be your savior. The specific moments of profound, crushing disappointment you feel, the times when you finally achieved the massive goal or acquired the prized possession, only to feel entirely empty the very next morning, are not cruel jokes of the universe. They are the flawless, intentional mercies of the Master Weaver. The salt water must burn. The illusion of earthly salvation must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop running through the mirrored halls, drop the heavy, gilded goblets of human desire, and turn your exhausted thirst toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine fulfillment. The restless, vibrating current of craving humming in your stomach, the subtle tension in your throat, and the tight, anxious restriction in your chest are the physical manifestations of your refusal to stop drinking the sand. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom consumer, subconsciously bracing to chase one last mirage in the dark. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally lay down the cup. You do not have to figure out your next acquisition tonight. As you surrender the desperate need for earthly satisfaction, your tense, trembling hands finally open. The heavy, gilded goblet slips from your grasp and shatters beautifully on the stone floor. You completely stop running. You stand entirely still in the center of the human machine, completely abandoning the frantic, impossible labor of trying to consume the world. The defensive, strained tension across your throat and chest completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to endlessly chase the next dopamine hit completely drains from your core. The terrifying illusion of the labyrinth instantly melts away as the mirrored walls slowly sink into the earth, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent river of the Creator's absolute living water, flowing perfectly at your feet. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to quench an eternal soul with temporary dust. Your entire being is completely unburdened. The chaotic noise of endless consumerism is entirely over. The thirst is perfectly quenched. The heart is flawlessly sustained, and your fragile, magnificent human form is beautifully, peacefully relieved. But as the frantic sprinting ends, and you finally rest beside the quiet river, a profound chill touches your skin. Without the frantic motion to keep you distracted, you suddenly realize you are entirely exposed. The modern world has taught you that to exist without a heavy, impenetrable persona is to invite certain destruction. The impenetrable persona and the exhaustion of concealment. There is a rigid, agonizing tension locked deep within the muscles of your face tonight. A subtle but exhausting paralysis that comes from spending your entire waking life performing a character. You lie in the dark, absolutely terrified by the sudden, breathtaking exposure of simply being alone with yourself. Modern society has engineered a culture of absolute, ruthless surveillance that demands the continuous curation of an impenetrable persona. We exist inside a hyper-connected machine that explicitly teaches us that to be seen as vulnerable, flawed, or uncertain is to invite catastrophic professional and social destruction. It commands you to meticulously manage your personal brand, to project an aura of effortless competence, and to build a heavy, polished psychological shield between your true, fractured heart and the unforgiving gaze of the public. The human-made system turns your very identity into a high-stakes public relations campaign. It tells you that if the world were to see the raw, unedited, struggling reality of your interior life, you would be instantly rejected and discarded. Because of this toxic, deeply paranoid conditioning, you treat your own authenticity as a fatal liability. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately acting out a script, completely terrified that if you drop the heavy mask for even a fraction of a second, the crowd will discover that you are merely a deeply exhausted human being trying to survive. You are suffocating under the crushing weight of your own disguise. To understand the profound spiritual devastation of this performance, we must look at a man who intentionally committed professional and social suicide in order to save his own soul. In the late 4th century, the Roman Empire was driven entirely by the concept of dignitas, a rigid, uncompromising code of stoic public perfection. The Roman elite never showed weakness, never admitted fault, and never exposed their private failures to the mob. But St. Augustine, having reached the absolute zenith of this society, realized that his flawless public persona was a spiritual prison. He recognized a staggering, reality-altering truth. You cannot be intimately healed by the Creator if you are violently hiding from Him. Augustine shocked the ancient world by writing his Confessions. It was an act of absolute, unflinching transparency. He publicly laid bare his deepest shames, his youthful lusts, his pathetic vanities, and his most senseless, irrational sins, including the famous theft of the pears from a neighbor's orchard, an act he committed simply because he loved the thrill of the dark. He dismantled his own majestic, untouchable Roman persona piece by piece, exposing the bleeding, terrified, fragile human underneath. He realized that a soul obsessed with managing its reputation is a soul that fundamentally blocks the unearned, rescuing grace of the true sovereign. This is the exact psychological torture chamber you are locked inside tonight. You're standing directly in the center of a brightly lit, blinding theatrical stage. The modern machine has strapped a massive, lead-lined iron mask to your face. The metal is incredibly heavy, violently pressing into your cheekbones and completely restricting your oxygen. The theater is completely packed with silent, highly critical spectators waiting for you to deliver a flawless performance. You are sweating profusely, your lungs burning, frantically reciting lines that you did not write and do not believe, completely paralyzed by the sheer terror of forgetting the script. You are entirely obsessed with maintaining the illusion of the character, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that you are slowly suffocating to death beneath the heavy iron prop. When you exhaust yourself trying to conceal your brokenness from the universe, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual arrogance. You are actively declaring that the flawless, all-seeing, unconditional love of the true sovereign is somehow easily fooled by your pathetic human disguise, or worse, that his grace is not powerful enough to love the reality of who you actually are. You are looking at the Creator, the Scrutator Cordis, the ultimate searcher of hearts, who intimately knows the absolute, unfiltered depths of your soul better than you do. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, carefully curated ego can successfully run a PR campaign against the Almighty. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of the impenetrable persona is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you perpetually alienated from the magnificent relief of being truly known. The human machine demands that you wear the lead mask because a society of terrified actors is easily manipulated. But the Creator does not ask you to perform. He asks you to step off the stage and stand in the raw, beautiful nakedness of your own truth. True dignity is not the violent, agonizing maintenance of a flawless facade. It is the profound, beautiful humility of realizing that the Master Weaver already knows exactly how broken you are, and he loves you flawlessly anyway. The specific moments of profound imposter syndrome you feel, the terrifying icy dread that you are going to be found out and exposed as a fraud, are not psychological defects. They are the flawless, biological alarms of a soul that is desperately begging to stop lying. The illusion of your untouchable persona must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop suffocating on the stage, unlatch the heavy, agonizing iron mask of human approval, and turn your exhausted, tear-stained face toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine acceptance. To orchestrate a radical surrender of this exhausting concealment, you must deliberately break character. The tight, defensive clenching of your jaw, the agonizing strain behind your eyes, and the rigid, artificial posture of your spine are the physical manifestations of your refusal to break the seal. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom actor, subconsciously bracing to deliver one last perfect line to a phantom audience. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally let the heavy costume fall. You do not have to impress the dark. As you surrender the desperate need for absolute concealment, your tense, trembling hands reach up to the sides of your face. you unlock the heavy iron clasps. The massive lead-lined mask pulls away from your skin, slipping from your grasp and hitting the wooden stage with a massive, dull thud. You completely step back from the blinding spotlights of the human machine, entirely abandoning the frantic, impossible labor of pretending to be untouchable. The defensive, strained tension across your facial muscles completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to carefully filter your own existence entirely drains from your consciousness. The terrifying illusion of the world's demand for absolute perfection instantly melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute, unearned love, flowing perfectly over your exposed, beautiful frailty. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to hide from the author of your soul. Your mind is completely unburdened from the terror of exposure. The chaotic noise of the theatrical performance is entirely over. You are beautifully, entirely known and perfectly safe. Yet, as the heavy lead mask hits the floor and the raw, unfiltered air of reality rushes into your lungs, the sudden, breathtaking exposure brings you face to face with the one undeniable truth the modern machine spends trillions of dollars trying to obscure. Now that you are no longer hiding, you can clearly hear the relentless, inescapable sound of a ticking clock. The slipping sand and the exhaustion of the final horizon. The relentless rhythmic ticking echoing in the quiet architecture of your room is not just the sound of a mechanical clock. It is the heavy, undeniable pulse of your own mortality. Even as you shed the heavy armor of your earthly ambitions, a deep, primal terror attempts to seize the center of your chest. It is the agonizing realization that time is strictly finite, and your biological lease on this earth is actively, irreversibly running out. Modern society has engineered a culture of absolute, hysterical denial regarding the final horizon. We are raised in a hyper-medicalized, youth-obsessed machine that explicitly treats aging as an administrative error and death as the ultimate, catastrophic defeat of the human will. It commands you to aggressively fight the passage of time, to view every lost second as a tragedy, and to believe that the absolute pinnacle of existence is bound exclusively to this fragile, decaying physical plane. The human-made system turns your sacred, temporary journey into a frantic, terrifying race against an unbeatable predator. It tells you that if you do not desperately cling to your youth, violently extract every ounce of productivity out of your days, and fundamentally view the end of life as a pitch-black abyss, you are simply giving up. Because of this toxic conditioning, you treat the natural, beautiful progression of time as a hostile invasion. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately trying to claw your way backward, completely terrified that when the final grain of sand drops, your entire existence will simply be annihilated into the void. To dismantle this terrifying temporal claustrophobia, we must look at a man who stood at the literal threshold of eternity and discovered that the end of time is not a collapse, but a magnificent arrival. In the year 387 AD, St. Augustine was waiting at the port city of Ostia with his mother Monica, preparing to sail back to Africa. Monica was nearing the end of her life. In the ancient Roman world, death was treated with chaotic, despairing terror. Pagans would violently tear their garments, wail in the streets, and aggressively cling to the physical corpses of their loved ones, believing that the material world was the only reality that mattered. But as Augustine and his mother stood looking out a window over an internal garden, they experienced a profound, shared, mystical vision. They intellectually ascended past the physical earth, past the stars, and entirely beyond the grinding mechanics of time, touching the absolute eternal stillness of the Creator, the idipsum, the self-same reality that never changes, never ages, and never dies. Shortly after this vision, Monica fell ill and passed away. But Augustine did not violently wail or tear his clothes. He recognized a staggering, reality-altering truth. Stepping out of the timeline is not a descent into the dark. It is the profound, beautiful act of stepping directly into the flawless, unshakable sanctuary of the Supreme Architect. This is the exact psychological trap you are desperately fighting tonight. You are trapped inside the bottom half of a massive, towering glass hourglass. The heavy, golden sand of your days is pouring down from the ceiling, slowly piling up around your feet. The modern machine has locked you inside this glass prison and convinced you that when the sand completely fills the chamber, you will be permanently suffocated. And so, you are frantically, violently trying to climb the slipping, shifting dunes of sand, desperately reaching upward, trying to physically plug the narrow opening with your bare, bleeding hands to stop the flow of time. You are completely paralyzed by the sheer terror of the rising sand, entirely obsessed with delaying the inevitable, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that the floor of the hourglass is actually an open door. When you exhaust yourself trying to frantically fight the natural, flawless progression of your own mortality, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual rebellion. You are actively declaring that the flawless, eternal, uncreated reality of the true sovereign is somehow inferior to the rusting, decaying dust of the human earth. You are looking at the Creator, the one who explicitly designed time as a temporary corridor to bring you home, not as a permanent cage to torture you. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, frantically climbing human ego knows a better way to exist. Augustine realized that the modern terror of the final horizon is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you perpetually enslaved to the material world. The human machine demands that you fight the falling sand, because it can only exert its power over you while you remain trapped in the glass. But the Creator does not ask you to halt the flow of time. He asks you to stop frantically scrambling up the dunes and trust the one who actually holds the hourglass. True peace is not the violent, agonizing attempt to outrun the clock. It is the profound, beautiful humility of realizing that the end of your time is the beginning of your eternity. These specific moments of profound existential dread you feel, the terrifying, cold realization of your own aging and the fragility of your life, are not moments of despair. They are the flawless, intentional invitations of a soul that was meant to outlast the stars. The illusion of earthly permanence must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop bleeding against the glass. Let go of your desperate grip on the passing days and turn your exhausted body toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of the divine sanctuary. To orchestrate a radical surrender of this exhausting terror, you must deliberately stop climbing the sand. The restless, vibrating current of panic humming in your chest, the subtle locking of your breath, and the tight, anxious tension wrapping around your core are the physical manifestations of your refusal to let time pass. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom survivor, subconsciously bracing to fight the unstoppable turning of the earth. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally lay down the burden of survival. You do not have to fight the clock tonight. As you surrender the desperate need to halt the flow of time, your tense, frantic limbs finally stop moving. You completely abandon the exhausting, impossible labor of trying to climb the slipping dunes. You simply lie back against the heavy, golden sand, entirely surrendering to the natural, flawless rhythm of the universe. At that exact moment, the massive glass walls of the hourglass silently shatter, instantly dissolve in the suffocating enclosure. The terrifying illusion of the void melts away, replaced by a vast, cool, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute eternity. The bottom of the hourglass drops away, and you do not fall into darkness. You sink effortlessly and perfectly into the infinite, warm, breathing ocean of the Creator's unshakable presence. The defensive, strained tension across your heart completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to endlessly outrun your own mortality completely drains from your soul. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to manually govern the timeline of your existence. Your spirit is completely unburdened. The frantic, desperate war against time is entirely over. The horizon is no longer a threat, but a promise flawlessly secured by the perfect love of the Supreme Architect, carrying you deeply and completely into the absolute, majestic stillness of the infinite. The freezing throne and the exhaustion of hyper-individualism. As the frantic, desperate war against your own mortality finally ceases and you sink into the vastness of the infinite, an entirely different kind of ache surfaces in the absolute quiet of the room. It is a profound, echoing hollowness that stems from the crushing weight of your own isolation. Modern society has engineered a culture of absolute, suffocating hyper-individualism. We are raised inside a psychological machine that explicitly worships the self-contained, completely independent human unit. It teaches you that relying on others is a liability, that community is secondary to personal success, and that the ultimate pinnacle of a well-lived life is to build a massive, impenetrable empire where you are the sole, uncontested sovereign. The human-made system turns your fragile, inherently relational soul into a heavily fortified island. It constantly preaches the polite, toxic lie that you are enough all by yourself, commanding you to look inward for all of your validation, healing, and purpose. Because of this deeply unnatural conditioning, you treat your own existence as if you are a universe of one. You burn your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately trying to be your own best friend, your own counselor, and your own God, completely terrified that to admit you are desperately lonely is to admit you have failed the modern test of self-sufficiency. To understand the sheer spiritual devastation of this profound isolation, we must look at a man who spent decades trapped inside the freezing echo chamber of his own ego. During his elite career in the Roman Empire, St. Augustine was surrounded by hundreds of followers, powerful patrons, and brilliant students. He attended the most exclusive banquets and engaged in endless, high-minded philosophical debates. Yet, despite being constantly surrounded by the crowd, he was utterly, fundamentally alone. He eventually realized a staggering, reality-altering truth about the architecture of human love. He recognized that the city of man is built entirely on amor sui, the love of self, pushed to the absolute contempt of God and others. Augustine discovered the concept of the soul, that is, incurvatus in se, a spirit violently curved inward upon itself. When a human being attempts to draw all their love, meaning, and security exclusively from within their own ego, they become spiritually suffocated. Augustine realized that the supreme architect explicitly designed the human heart to flow outward in caritas, divine charity, toward the Creator and outward toward other souls. To forcefully bend that love inward is to strangle the soul to death. This is the precise psychological exile you are enduring tonight. You are sitting entirely alone on a massive, heavy iron throne in the center of a sprawling, windowless marble palace. The modern machine has crowned you the absolute monarch of your own life. You have spent years building the walls of this palace thicker and higher, meticulously ensuring that no one can hurt you, betray you, or inconvenience you. But the massive marble hall is pitch black, and the hearth fire has completely burned out. You are wearing a heavy, rusted iron crown that is violently digging into your skull and bowing your neck under its immense weight. You are shivering in the dark, weeping with sheer physical exhaustion, completely paralyzed by the terrifying emptiness of your own kingdom. You are entirely obsessed with maintaining your absolute sovereignty, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that you are freezing to death inside a fortress of your own making. When you exhaust yourself trying to be an entirely self-sufficient, untouchable island, you are secretly committing a profound act of spiritual rebellion. You are actively declaring that the flawless, deeply relational, interconnected design of the true sovereign is a structural flaw. You are looking at the Creator, the one who exists as a perfect communion of love, the one who explicitly wove the cosmos together in a massive, breathtaking tapestry of mutual dependence. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, desperately isolated human ego can somehow thrive in a vacuum. Augustine realized that the modern pursuit of hyper-individualism is an invention of the ego, designed specifically to keep you permanently disconnected from the healing power of divine communion. The human machine demands that you remain a solitary king, because an isolated, lonely consumer is the easiest target to manipulate. But the Creator does not ask you to rule an empty palace. He asks you to step down from the freezing iron throne and take your rightful, humble place within the magnificent, interconnected city of God. True strength is not the violent, agonizing maintenance of emotional isolation. It is the profound, beautiful humility of realizing that you were never designed to carry the universe alone. The specific moments of profound, aching loneliness you feel, the times when the self-help mantras completely fail, and you realize that your own company is simply not enough to sustain your spirit, are not signs of psychological weakness. They are the flawless biological alarms of a creature that is starving for communion. The illusion of your self-contained sovereignty must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop shivering on the throne, drop the heavy, agonizing iron crown of hyper-independence, and turn your exhausted heart toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine belonging. The restless, vibrating current of emptiness humming in your chest, the subtle pulling of your shoulders inward, and the tight, anxious restriction in your throat are the physical manifestations of your soul aggressively curving inward upon itself. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom monarch, subconsciously bracing to defend a palace that contains absolutely nothing of value. But the night is a vast, unjudging sanctuary, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally abdicate the throne. You do not have to rule your own isolation tonight. As you surrender the desperate need to be entirely self-sufficient, your tense, trembling hands reach up to your head. The heavy, rusted iron crown lifts away from your brow, slipping from your grasp and hitting the marble floor with a massive, echoing crash. You completely step down from the freezing throne, entirely abandoning the frantic, impossible labor of being your own savior and your own audience. At that exact moment, the massive, suffocating marble walls of the human-made palace instantly dissolve into thin air. The terrifying illusion of your isolation melts away, replaced by a vast, warm, magnificent wave of the Creator's absolute presence. You are suddenly surrounded by the vast, unseen communion of saints, angels, and loved ones, flawlessly held together by the unconditional love of the Supreme Architect. The defensive, strained tension across your chest completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to endlessly protect yourself completely drains from your soul. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of living in a vacuum. Your spirit is completely unburdened from the terror of isolation. The chaotic noise of the ego is entirely over. You are perfectly connected, flawlessly loved, and beautifully, peacefully relieved. Yet, as the walls of the palace fall away and you finally sink into the warmth of this infinite communion, the very last, most stubborn fragment of your human ego suddenly panics. Now that you have dropped every single defense, the modern machine issues one final, desperate warning. It tells you that if you actually let go of your waking consciousness and surrender to sleep, you will be utterly defenseless in the dark. The eternal harbor and the Sabbath of the soul. The final, lingering barrier between your exhausted body and the absolute peace of deep sleep is the terrifying threshold of unconsciousness itself. even as the heavy armor of the world has been stripped away. Your waking mind violently resists the final act of letting go. Modern society has engineered a culture that treats sleep not as a sacred sanctuary, but as a dangerous biological vulnerability. We are raised inside a hypervigilant machine that explicitly teaches us that we are the absolute, undisputed sentinels of our own existence. It commands you to remain constantly on guard, convincing you that the moment your intellect powers down, the world will fundamentally collapse without your supervision. The human-made system turns the natural, beautiful descent into rest into a frantic battle for control. It tells you that yielding your consciousness is a terrifying loss of sovereignty. Because of this toxic, deeply ingrained paranoia, you treat the approach of sleep as if you're stepping off a cliff into a hostile void. You burn the very last drops of your irreplaceable vital energy, desperately holding your eyes open, entirely terrified that if you hand over the reins of your mind for even a fraction of a second, the darkness will swallow you whole. To dismantle this final, ultimate terror of surrender, we must look at a man who faced the absolute, literal collapse of his world, and yet found a peace so profound it defies human logic. In the final days of St. Augustine's life, the city of Hippo was violently besieged by the Vandal barbarian army. The physical walls of his city were actively crumbling. The screams of warfare echoed outside his window. Everything he had built, preached, and loved on this earth was facing imminent destruction. Yet, as he lay on his deathbed, listening to the chaotic end of his world, Augustine did not panic. He had the penitential psalms written out and hung on the walls of his room, and he spent his final hours weeping tears of profound, unshakable peace. Augustine recognized a staggering, reality-altering truth in his final hours. The ultimate act of human faith is the complete, unreserved surrender of control to the Creator. He had spent his entire life writing about the requies, the ultimate Sabbath rest of the soul. He realized that the human mind was never meant to be the eternal watchman of the universe. He knew that the supreme architect, the watchman who neither slumbers nor sleeps, was standing guard over the city of God, a city that barbarians, time, and darkness could never touch. This is the exact psychological fortress you are standing upon tonight. You are a lone, profoundly exhausted sentinel, standing on the freezing, jagged stone of a massive watchtower overlooking a dark, raging ocean. The modern machine has handed you a heavy iron lantern and told you that if you blink, if you lower the light for even a millisecond, the rogue waves will completely destroy the shore. And so, you are standing in the freezing wind, your eyes burning, your muscles locking in agonizing spasms, violently fighting the heavy narcotic pull of your own exhaustion. You are completely paralyzed by the sheer terror of falling asleep on duty, entirely obsessed with maintaining your post, completely ignoring the breathtaking fact that the true sovereign commands the oceans and the waves have already been ordered to be still. When you exhaust yourself trying to aggressively guard the gates of your own consciousness, you are secretly committing the final act of spiritual arrogance. You are actively declaring that the flawless, omnipotent, all-encompassing protection of the true sovereign is somehow asleep, and that he requires your pathetic, blinking human eyes to keep you safe in the dark. You are looking at the Creator, the one who flawlessly sustains your heartbeat while you dream, the one who holds the entire vastness of the cosmos in the palm of his hand. And you are arrogant enough to believe that your panicked, heavily exhausted, desperately waking human ego is your actual protector. Augustine realized that the modern terror of letting go is the final, desperate gasp of an ego that refuses to be a creature. The human machine demands that you stay awake because it profits from your anxiety. But the Creator does not ask you to guard the watchtower. He asks you to step down from the freezing stone and enter the eternal Sabbath. True peace is not the violent, agonizing refusal to close your eyes. It is the profound, beautiful humility of handing the keys of your existence back to the Master Weaver. The specific moments of heavy, overwhelming drowsiness you feel, the times when your body is begging you to simply let the darkness take you, are not vulnerabilities. They are the flawless, intentional invitations of the Creator, calling you into the sanctuary of His rest. The illusion of your ultimate control must violently shatter. It is the only way you will finally stop freezing on the wall, drop the heavy, agonizing lantern of your vigilance, and turn your exhausted consciousness toward the unshakable, wordless certainty of divine protection. The restless, vibrating current of resistance humming behind your eyelids, the subtle locking of your jaw, and the tight, anxious tension wrapping around your brain are the physical manifestations of your refusal to drop the anchor. Your nervous system is holding on to the cruel illusion of the phantom sentinel, subconsciously bracing to fight off the heavy, beautiful tide of sleep. But the night is a vast, unjudging, infinite harbor, explicitly offering you the profound permission to finally relinquish your post. You do not have to guard the universe tonight. As you surrender the desperate need for conscious control, your tense, trembling hands finally open. The heavy iron lantern slips from your grasp and clatters against the stone, its artificial light instantly extinguished. You completely step back from the freezing edge of the watchtower, entirely abandoning the frantic, impossible labor of being your own protector. The defensive, strained tension across your forehead and eyes completely, beautifully melts. The desperate need to endlessly supervise your own existence completely drains from your mind. The terrifying illusion of the hostile void instantly melts away. You are a massive, battered wooden ship that has finally crossed the raging ocean and glided effortlessly into a perfectly still, majestic, ancient stone harbor. A heavy iron anchor drops from the bow, plunging silently into the deep, glassy water. hitting the bedrock of the Creator's absolute sovereignty. You completely resign from the exhausting, impossible job of running your own life. The ship settles completely. The sails are lowered. The wind has entirely ceased. Your entire being is completely unburdened. The chaotic noise of the human machine is entirely, permanently over. You are perfectly guarded, flawlessly sustained, and infinitely loved. The watchman is on the wall. The Sabbath has arrived. You sink effortlessly, beautifully, and completely into the profound, heavy, flawless protection of the divine, letting the majestic silence carry you down into the absolute sanctuary of a deep, unshakable, and perfect sleep.